Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, thanks. All right, looks like everyone's ready. Why don't we start with the Marin Clean Energy Board meeting for Thursday, June 5th. Welcome, everyone. Item 1, board announcements. Doesn't look like we have any. Item 2, public open time. Anyone on items not otherwise on the agenda? Doesn't look like it this evening. Okay, item 3, Dawn, report from Executive Officer.
Great, I have just a couple of items this evening. First, I wanted to let folks know that there's going to be a public hearing on Monday, June 9th, regarding the Cooley Quarry solar project, which is up for consideration at the County of Marin Planning Commission. They're going to start with a site visit in the morning, which unfortunately conflicts with our TechCom, but folks who aren't going to be at the TechCom meeting could potentially go to the site visit. Oh, they moved the hearing? Oh, the 23rd. Interesting. Okay. So thank you for the update there. So that'll be on June 23rd. Are they still doing a site visit?
Site visit still happening.
Okay, great. Wonderful. So it could be a great opportunity to go and check out the site if you're interested in seeing it, because it'll be open. It's open to the public. And then there will be a Planning Commission hearing in the afternoon. I believe their session usually starts at 1 p.m. So we'll keep you all posted on that.
I think it should be a TechCom field trip.
Maybe so, yeah. Okay. Since you're the
We can
chair,
talk more about
yeah. It is done. Consider it done.
Yes.
Get lunch.
They want lunch. These are young.
For those who aren't aware, we've talked about this a little bit in some committee meetings, but the Cooley Quarry project is a potential solar project, 1 to 1.5 megawatts potentially, that could be a part of our feed-in tariff program and could potentially be devoted to our Soul Shares program to serve that load. So we're really excited about the potential there. It looks like a really promising site because it's a brownfield and great location as well. So we'll follow up with everyone and confirm the time of the site visit and the Planning Commission meeting if you'd like to participate. I'll let you know. And then the only other thing I have is I wanted to just highlight that our July board meeting falls on July 3rd, which is the night before a holiday. We just wanted to, if y'all can get back to Darlene and confirm if you're going to be able to make it or not. We want to make sure we'll have a quorum that evening and see if we need to make any alternate arrangements for meeting times. We typically do not hold a meeting in August, so that July meeting date will be important, and if we need to postpone it to later in the month, it'd be good to know that sooner rather than later. So let us know if you have plans to be away that night. And just one last reminder, we have an XCOM meeting coming up on Monday. We'll be talking about our Greenie audit, and we'll also have an energy efficiency update on some recent exciting activity on the energy efficiency front. That's it for my report. Any questions?
Great, thanks, Dawn. Are you going to cover legislative later?
Yes, that'll be later in the agenda.
Okay, great. Questions for Dawn? Doesn't look like any. Okay, item 4, consent calendar. Any discussion or questions on that? Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up the budget, and because I'm an alternative, so I don't have access to the full budget. As an outsider looking at this, I find, and this is something that you all find, so I don't find it particularly easy to interpret. I can't tell if you're doing well or poorly, because it doesn't say that. And so when you have budget, and then you have actual, and then you have remaining budget, and then you have percentage of the actual versus the budget. I don't know if that's where you're supposed to be or you're not supposed to be. And so right now your revenue is somewhat below your expenditures, but perhaps that's just to be expected, and that's where you are in this month. But there's no way of telling that. And as anyone coming in, if you're presenting this as part of your consent agenda, then I should be able to tell that. NSBF?
Absolutely, that's a great question. I think one thing that's important to know in looking at the budget is that the start of our fiscal year is April 1. So that kind of helps with kind of the percentage spent and the percentage of revenue. What we're looking at here in the budgetary comparison schedule is the April 1 through April 30th budget. But Emily, do you want to say anything in addition to that?
Yeah, the budget to actual is just for the month, so it's how it's pacing for the month based on our projections.
But that doesn't tell me anything.
Okay.
I can't tell is that good, bad, or indifferent.
Okay.
Are you supposed to be at that? Are you supposed to be more? Are you supposed to be less? You know, you can't tell anything. And usually budgets show year over year, and there's nothing that shows me that either. It should be a snapshot that anybody coming in can take a look at and say, wow, that's right. But I don't know that it's not great, and I don't know that it is great.
Sure. We try to address some of...
It's a cool way to present it, is what I'm saying.
Okay. We can take a look at that. Some of the staff report, and again, we've been doing this sort of the same way for the last, since I've been here, but we can incorporate new ideas, and that's a really good feedback for somebody being new to it, because the public should see it that way as well. But some of the staff report addresses sort of an analysis of the monthly snapshot, but it could certainly go deeper, and that might be the place to provide more detail.
I don't think you need to go deeper. I'm looking for a better summary.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to talk to you offline about this, but.
Can we get a little more detail on what you're looking for? So this is the monthly snapshot. You're saying in conjunction with this, you'd like to see more annual.
There are different
as well.
ways of presenting this, so you can present it year over year, so you can see how it looks against last year, and you can also see it against what it's supposed to be for that particular month. And that will give people a better idea of what you're doing. But I don't want to waste a lot of time. I'm just saying that for an outsider, this is impossible to tell.
We do have different monthly reports that we submit to other counterparties, so maybe that's something we can look at as an
I
example.
would love to see it.
Yeah.
We also have audited financials that come out on an annual basis. Those are typically released in July of every year, and those show the year-over-year
Sure.
progress and have a lot more detail.
Right.
So that might be a useful point of reference as well.
I'm not looking for detail, I'm looking for a better summary.
Okay.
So maybe
Yeah, we'd be happy to take feedback maybe after the meeting.
quarterly or
Yeah,
something.
unfortunately, this is something we do for a living, so we can talk about it offline.
Yeah.
That's great. We're always looking for improvement.
I can follow up with you on that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other issues? Yes.
As to the minutes, I noticed when reading them that the recounting of the presentation of staff is complete and good. When it comes to questions and comments from members of the board, all that is stated for all the items, at least for this time around, is that the staff responded to questions from the board. And given that our role includes the functions of policymaking and oversight, there should be more substance of what the issues or points are that the board raises in the minutes, so that somebody can just go back and get some idea and doesn't have to go look at a tape to figure out what was said.
Great, that's really helpful feedback. Thank you. We often we get feedback from time to time to include more or less, but I think that's the specific suggestion of including more from the board comments is a really good one, because I think you're right that there is more detail provided on the other side, and we can add a little more balance to that. So thank you.
Agreed. Anything further? Okay, do I have a motion?
I would move we approve the consent calendar.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Item 5, ad hoc committee for special consideration membership.
Great. So from time to time, we have the need to pull together an ad hoc committee for various topics. Some examples are the ad hoc rate setting committee that we typically pull together in January and February of each year prior to the setting of rates. We also have an ad hoc committee currently in place to deal with the open season bids that came in for power supply. At this time, we are proposing pulling together an ad hoc special committee to deal with the special consideration membership concept, which was brought up at our board retreat last fall and hasn't yet had any attention from staff or the board. And so some pre-digesting in a ad hoc committee seemed like an appropriate next step. There's not an urgent need for this committee to begin meeting right away, but We're looking to pull it together so that we have something in place if there's a need in the summer to get together and talk about special consideration membership. So a couple of board members have expressed interest in the committee, and as you all have seen in your packet, we've listed some of the potential members here, and I should say that we have room for more. So if you don't see your name on the list and you really want to be part of any discussions around special consideration membership, now's the time to kind of throw your name in the ring and we can get it firmed up. So at this point, Director Butt, Director Athos, Director Bailey, Director McCaskill, and Director Green have all provided us with interest, some level of interest in being on this committee. And if there's anyone else that's interested, they could say so at this point.
Okay, is this being formed for any particular reason, or just kind of going forward as these issues come up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a couple of communities that don't fit in with the affiliate membership criteria that our board pulled together in the fall that allows kind of a step-by-step process for the communities that are within 30 miles. And I'll just kind of remind folks that when we held our retreat last fall, we adopted a expansion policy that had a delineation of two types of expansion that we might consider. The affiliate membership communities were communities that were within 30 miles of our existing jurisdiction and had a customer base of 40,000 or less. This was kind of a result of the experience that we had in Richmond, where we kind of had a sense of what it would be like to do an expansion of that size or smaller. At the time that the policy was adopted, we also adopted a step-by-step process for affiliate members that's relatively straightforward to request membership, go through a membership study, adopt a resolution, etc., to potentially become members of MCE. The other delineated category was called special consideration membership, and there was never a process set up for how a special consideration member might approach us and how they might be able to work with us or join our agency. Special consideration communities are communities that are 40,000, would result in a customer base of more than 40,000 customers, or are farther away than 30 miles from our existing jurisdiction. One example would be San Francisco. Another example would be Arcata. Santa Barbara has been inquiring a bit lately with how we might handle special consideration. So the idea is really to just start a discussion without we don't have a big timeline that we need to adhere to or a big push to have an outcome come out of this committee, but to start the discussion about what we might want to do in response to requests from these types of communities that are larger or farther away than we could allow for in the affiliate membership category.
Okay. Any kind of reaction to this?
I think it's a good idea to create this committee. I mean, we started out, we had an interesting conversation about whether expansion was a good idea, what some of the pitfalls and certain things we should be thinking about were when we did our board retreat in September, and the issues burbled up as we've talked about NAPA and whatnot. And I think it would be very helpful to have this committee to have a bit of a richer conversation and then lead us into a board retreat this fall. So I'm in favor of doing it. I don't necessarily want to be on it. Coach, misinterpret.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and also, just given what's going on with AB 2145, I mean, it might get mooted, but it starts, it also might help just create intangible force to go in the opposite direction.
Members of the public on this item? Doesn't look like anyone. Okay, so we're being asked to essentially form an ad hoc committee for special consideration membership issues as they arise.
That's a good group.
So we have some proposed members. I assume everyone whose name appears is good with that. Okay. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Opposed, that carries. Good. Okay, item Item 6, MC feed-in tariff amendment.
It's just a little bit of background on the feed-in tariff. Since it was established in 2010 with 2 megawatts capacity, we've increased it to 10 in November of 2011. As a result of adding the Soul Shares program this last April, we're trying to establish a mechanism to use the same tariff modified slightly to accommodate the Soul Shares program projects. Basically, the Soul Shares would be our normal feed-in tariff project, but it would be outside of the capacity limits that we have in the feed-in tariff. So this mechanism, staff would select a project, move it outside of the feed-in tariff. We would get the current rate that's in the feed-in tariff, but all the other aspects of the feed-in tariff would remain separate for the normal feed-in tariff applicants.
What do you mean outside the capacity?
So,
More than one
so
megawatt.
for each condition, we have 2 megawatts of capacity available.
Okay.
So right now we have 1 megawatt, slightly over 1 megawatt available. So if we took a megawatt project in right now, potentially another megawatt could still qualify because we didn't quite hit that capacity limit. With this mechanism in the feed-in tariff, we will select and move that project outside of the feed-in tariff consideration. So that'll leave more capacity within that the rate of that tariff.
It basically wouldn't count against the participatory cap that's been established. So this essentially has the effect of expanding the cap ever so slightly for a single project that would be hosting, if you will, the Soul Shares 100% local solar program, which I think is really a great benefit to local solar developers, in the sense that it does allow for additional capacity to be developed on a local basis. And also kind of strengthens the price signal, if you will, for these local developers, providing them additional incentives to develop these projects within MCE service territory.
I mean, I absolutely agree with that, but is there going to be is there in effect a new cap? Or
No, this really kind of exists outside. It's a special treatment, if you will, for a single project initially that would be used to source the Soul Shares program. So it's not a new cap explicitly. It's just designation by staff of a particular project for hosting the Soul Shares program. And so to the extent that such a project is designated, then it would receive essentially the current feed-in tariff price that's available. So relatively, very competitive price to incentivize that local development. And then also wouldn't count against the cap for other development projects that might fall in line later. So, yeah, I think, hopefully that answers.
how big is the anticipated Soul Shares project?
It'd be a single megawatt.
1 megawatt.
Yeah.
If that 1 megawatt were fully subscribed, then we would have the next tariff project that came in, we would need to open that to a new subscription limit, then we would add another partner, another project diverted.
Okay.
And that process there, I think, as it's envisioned, would likely flow through as the process has done to date, flow through TechCom. There'd be discussion there, and so on and so forth. And so we'd be as deliberate as we've been in the past in expanding that program to the extent that that's necessary.
So at the heart of it, this is a way to expand local generation.
Yeah, basically maintain the strength of the current incentives that are being offered for local solar development projects.
How does it affect the solar customers in the Solar Share program in terms of pricing?
It would be the same price that we've discussed and that was also approved by our board. So no change in that regard. This is essentially a pass-through program, if you will. So the price that's being paid to the vendor, in this case the developer, would also be paid by the customer.
So then just, any more questions?
Questions? Yes. Sure.
Just, I didn't really understand the right to divert clause that is added here, and I was wondering if you could explain what that really
Well, the intent of this was to give staff the discretion to select projects that are most appropriate for the Soul Shares project, maybe most representative, most local, had all the attributes that we're trying to promote in the local solar development program. For instance, the Cooley Corridor project that is the likely candidate at this point is a very local project. It's a brownfield site. The environmental review is virtually complete at this point. There haven't been any protests, so it's a good benchmark project for the Soul Shares program.
So what is it being diverted from?
It applied under the feed-in tariff, but then staff has the option to select with discussion with the ad hoc contracts committee whether that project will be pulling out of the feed-in tariff and set into the sole shares program.
So it gets diverted to the sole shares category, which means that the feed-in tariff cap remains intact
I see.
without diminishing it.
Okay.
And isn't it part of the Soul Shares program, the aim of it is to provide ratepayer stability over the long term? And so what this modification is accomplishing is providing the opportunity to service the Soul Shares program more.
It's providing certainty for both the developers and the ratepayers so that at any point in time, the status of the feed-in tariff will be that rate that's going to be applicable to a project.
Do you foresee there being problems in terms of getting somebody on the other side of the bargaining table where staff's exercising the choice about how what they're going to do is going to be designated on our end, or is that a non-issue?
Hasn't been an issue so far, and pretty robust participation right currently. We have 4 to 5 megawatts of projects in various stages of development right now, so it's pretty robust at the moment.
You know, and I think at this point, really, you know, we're very much kind of at the beginning of filling this cap up. So I don't foresee that there would be any issues for the foreseeable future anyway, and, you know, kind of creating conflicts or push-pull scenarios between different projects. I think they all can exist. It's just a matter of whether or not, you know, we designate this one as being the sole shares project versus this other one as being kind of part of the feed-in tariff at large.
Okay. Further questions on this item? Members of the public? Doesn't look like anyone. Okay, we need a motion to approve the proposed feed-in tariff amendment.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. So looking at the supplemental agenda here, item 7A, resolution of the Board of Directors approving the County of Napa as a member of MC.
So just by way of background to catch everyone up on this, we've been working with the County of Napa over the last few months regarding a membership study. And you all may remember that they came to us last fall with a request to be considered as a member. And this was following the affiliate membership process that your board laid out and approved at our last retreat. And so the membership request was the first one that came in according to that affiliate membership step-by-step process. And it triggered the membership study that we undertook at the beginning of this year, really. And we had results that came in and were presented to technical committee a couple months ago, and then they came to the full board at our last board meeting. Given the positive results that came out of the membership study that were presented at the last board meeting, the County of Napa was kind of given the green light to go forward with their final action, which they took on Tuesday, which was to approve the enabling ordinance that allows for them to be part of a CCA program. They also approved the resolution requesting membership, and they also designated a director to sit on the board at the time at which we're ready to have a director sit on the board. There are a couple other things, kind of formalities that need to occur to allow for us to move forward with the procurement and the enrollment process for the County of Napa. One of those actions we'll be talking about on our next board item, which is the updating of the implementation plan. Part of the implementation plan submittal will include the updated JPA, Joint Powers Authority Agreement, that each of our member jurisdictions have signed and making them formally a part of the Joint Powers Authority. So the item before you right now is the resolution approving the County of Napa as a member. kind of paving the way for them to be integrated into our implementation plan, which would then be submitted to the CPUC for approval. And I can answer a question, but I know that the two items are a little bit interrelated, so, and I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I will say that the implementation plan process takes 30 to 90 days for the CPUC to turn that around and certify the implementation plan. If there are questions about that or the resolution, I'm happy to answer them at this point.
What's the time frame? Like if we do approve this, maybe lay it out for us, when would enrollment occur, when would the new board members start, those sorts of things?
Yeah, so I think that the normal time frame that we would be looking at is submitting the implementation plan later in the month, at the point where NAPA has done the final reading of the ordinance. That's currently set for June 17th. So we could be prepared and submit the implementation plan really the very next day. And then after the implementation plan has been certified by the CPUC, that would be the point at which we can start having a NAPA representative sit on our board. So it could be within the next few months, which would be great. In the meantime, we will be working internally on the procurement side and making sure that we have resources in place to serve the load. And we would be planning for an enrollment that would happen sometime next spring, sometime around the start of our fiscal year, which would mean noticing customers in Napa probably in the January timeframe. So that's the most likely scenario. As you all are probably aware, there's a bill making its way through the Senate right now that could have a big impact on how CCA programs operate starting January 1 of 2015. If that bill continues to move forward, we'll be talking about this in the legislative update, kind of what we anticipate, where we think that the bill will have more information about whether it looks like the bill's going to move forward or not. I think we have a couple of weeks that will have a pretty good indication of that. If it looks like the bill is continuing to move forward, then we may need to look at accelerating the NAPA enrollment so that they aren't subjected to this new bill if it becomes law. If that it looks like the likely scenario, then we would need to complete our procurement during the summer, by the end of the summer, and begin our noticing in September. The noticing process takes a couple of months, and then we would begin cutting customers over on November 30th so that they would be completely enrolled by the end of December. So that would be Plan B.
Just maybe kind of a dumb question. What about the incorporated municipalities within NAPA? Are they, I assume they're excluded from this, they have to take their own actions?
Yeah, the way that our affiliate membership process is set up is it's really one jurisdiction at a time needs to approach us and request membership. So in this case, the County of Napa was the most eager to come in and join us. I know that some of the cities within Napa County are also interested. So that's something we might take up in the future if we get a formal request from any of them.
Okay, but this could actually provide a kind of a model for participation by the municipalities up there, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the city of Richmond was our first example of adding a new community beyond our original boundaries. I think the County of Napa is the first time we've added a county, an unincorporated county beyond our original boundaries. And I think it could lead to some cities expressing an interest after the fact.
Further questions or comments on this item, members of the public?
One.
Yes.
For the planning, I wouldn't want to belabor it, but I might as well say the obvious Plan B, unless we're really sure that 2145 is not going to move, because Napa will be the last gas.
Yeah, good
We
point.
don't want to miss that,
Yeah.
no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's really have a full discussion on 2145 later.
Happy
A
to.
lot of things are leading toward that. And just to remind the board, we have a few other, at least 2 or 3 other communities in the pipeline right now, right?
We do. San Pablo is in the pipeline right now. We've just this week, we received the data from PG&E for that community, so we can initiate the data analysis that needs to happen. That typically takes about a month, so we may be able to bring some information back to you at the next board meeting. And then there are there are a couple of other communities in the East Bay that may be interested in going the membership route, and Alex is going to provide a little update on that later on.
Great. Okay, so Napa joint resolution to approve. So
I
that's-
move it.
Okay. All right. Exciting stuff. So, all in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? That matter carries unanimously. Okay, item 7B, MCE implementation plan update.
Okay, so this is, maybe the less exciting half of the agenda item here. But there is a legal requirement, and some of you are likely familiar with it, and that is when a CCA program intends to launch service, it is required to submit an implementation plan to the California Public Utilities Commission describing the manner in which the organization will kind of organize itself and staff itself, and how it will set rates and secure power supply, and really conduct business, generally speaking. It's really kind of the story that it tells about how it intends to exist both now and in the future. And every time a member is added, that implementation plan must be updated to reflect the addition of that new member, as well as some projections related to the addition of that new member, and in particular things like increased energy requirements that will be necessary in the future to serve the new member community, increased customer accounts, increase peak demand, so the intensity at which you use energy, and various other items, including renewable energy purchases and energy efficiency programs, and how those programs will be affected, and so on and so forth. And so, in light of the fact that Napa just kind of made this decision 2 days ago, we're kind of in the process of doing this now, and it's a little atypical. We'd normally bring you these revisions completed, but in light of the discussion that we've kind of started having already about 2145 and the position that kind of puts us in, time is of the essence to a certain extent. And so we're trying to complete these updates as quickly, but as accurately and deliberately as we possibly can in light of that timing. And so that's what we're in the process of doing right now. And the staff report that is included with this agenda item outlines kind of generally speaking what these edits are going to entail throughout the document. And you've received a copy of a red line version of the document already in your board packet, and that kind of essentially shows you where the edits are going. There are a number of strike-throughs with the tables, the tabular information that's in the document in particular. Those quantitative references are being updated right now. And they will all be updated in consideration of the presentation that was delivered to you last month here at the full board meeting, as well as the technical committee prior to that, in which we discussed the number of customers that we anticipate adding as part of this Napa County expansion, as well as the increased energy requirements and various other impacts to our procurement efforts stemming from this particular change. And so those numbers will essentially be pulled in to these tables reflecting the increased energy requirements going forward. And it's a little bit interesting to even call this an implementation plan at this point for an agency that's already been operating for over 4 years' time. And so this kind of represents the numbers as they have already existed kind of on an actual basis in the past, as well as projections going forward. So it's really, I think, useful to the commission in understanding where we've been and where we're going and everywhere in between. And so, as Dawn mentioned, the submittal of this document, which I think we're going to try to line up with the second reading, more or less, that Napa County will be undertaking of its CCA ordinance. That will trigger this 90-day clock. To date, the Public Utilities Commission has not taken the full 90 days to review the document, and we're hoping to be highly cooperative with them as they go through this administrative review and answer questions as expeditiously as possible so we can hopefully get through this as quickly as possible and really allow ourselves as much time as possible on the back end of that timeline to complete all the necessary procurement efforts and noticing requirements, should those be necessary in order to enroll customers by the end of 2014. So, I think absent walking through the changes, which are fairly straightforward, I'm happy to answer any questions. You'll notice here that one of the other items that's more administrative in nature is simply addressing the name change of this agency, which occurred last year, and so that will be an update that's occurring throughout the document. You probably noticed that in the red line as well. But I try to include some references here as to the chapters that will be updated in relation to these specific key revisions, and I think that's about it.
Great, thank you. Any questions on this item? And needless to say, we have a procurement plan in place with NAPA coming on board to meet that new need.
Absolutely, that's correct, and that is inclusive of a broad range of energy products that are consistent with what this agency is already procuring for its customers, including the energy, the electric commodity itself that the Napa County customers will need, essentially resource adequacy capacity or the reserve capacity that's necessary in order to ensure kind of reliable operation of the bulk electric system. That's also a mandatory product that needs to be purchased. Of course, renewable energy is kind of a key component of that as well. And then various other carbon-free energy sources and renewable energy sources to make sure that we honor the commitment that this agency has made to its customers in the form of the light green and deep green products. So that's what we'll be looking to procure going forward.
Great. Members of the public? Okay. So I need a motion on item 7D.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Okay, thank you. So item 8, power purchase agreements with Exelon for power supply, including renewable energy.
Yeah. For those of you not familiar with Exelon, Exelon was a merger with Constellation Energy a few years back. So the name may not be familiar, but Exelon is one of the larger power suppliers in the country. This project, this transaction is for Bucket 2, PCC2, renewable energy, bundled energy.
Translate that.
So Bucket 1 is where the generation and the renewable attributes are transferred in one transaction contemporaneously. With the Bucket 2 transaction like this, the renewable aspect is generated usually beforehand, and then it is sold with, remarketed, rebundled with the energy delivered, what they call bundled and or shaped and to basically formed and shaped to match your existing load or what you need. In this case, they'll be delivering a 25 megawatt block of power for all hours during probably a 45-month period during the year with renewable attributes. And so it's not necessarily energy from the actual project, but it is bundled with the renewable attributes from another project.
Does it account toward the renewable portfolios?
It's one aspect of the renewable portfolio standard, yes.
Yeah, the Bucket 2 product is very much counting and should be characterized as a bundled renewable energy product. So this is one where we're getting the renewable or kind of green attribute. We're also getting electric energy as part of that. There are some emission reporting benefits that also are associated with this particular product, which I think are meaningful to this discussion as well. And yeah, it's a relatively small piece of our renewable portfolio standard procurement obligation, but unlike the Bucket 3 or unbundled renewable energy product, there's really no limit as to what you can buy if you want to voluntarily exceed the state's RPS. So Bucket 2 products are a great way if you want to go kind of above and beyond the renewable portfolio standard to do that in such a way that's relatively unobjectionable, because again, it is a bundled product, typically at a lower cost. And again, there's some emission-related reporting benefits associated with this as well.
You started to get toward my next question, and that is the strategy behind pursuing this. And you talked a little bit about cost, about renewable benefit, maybe you can elaborate. How does it compare cost-wise, renewable bank with bucket-wise?
Yeah, so, just kind of ratio-wise, if you're looking at an in-state or a bucket one type product, this is roughly 1/3 to 1/4 the cost, so considerably less than that type of a product, and anywhere from, say, 3 to 4 times more expensive than a bucket 3 product. So bucket 3.
That's in regards to the premium.
In the premium, I'm sorry, yeah, exactly.
So that's you think of renewables, oftentimes when we deal with it and procure it, we're looking at the premium on top of non-renewable power. And so when Kirby's saying a bucket 2 premium is going to be about 1/3 what a bucket 1 premium would be. But when you put that together because it's a bundled purchase of energy, I'll just give you example numbers, for instance. You're buying a bucket 1, so in-state energy, which would be the energy plus the renewable premium, you might be paying, let's say, $70 per megawatt hour. And the bucket 2, you might be paying roughly 55, 56. So that's where the savings comes in. And the RPS law, it specifically allows for these types of purchases. It has minimum amounts of bucket 1 you need to buy, and then it allows for the bucket 2, it specifically calls it out, and also has maximum amounts of bucket 3. So this all fits in. And so it's a cost-effective part of the renewable portfolio compliance requirements.
John or Kirby or Greg, do you have a sense of why we received so few offers of bucket 2 energy during our open season?
My sense is that the timing of our open season process is a little out of sync with the bucket 2 market. A lot of agencies are sort of closing out their portfolio at the end of the year and in the first quarter. So the counterparties we've dealt with don't really know what inventory they're going to have until after the open season closes. So we've had much more success in conversations dealing with them in the second quarter of the year after they've already closed out the previous year.
Is there more competition for bucket 2 products than bucket 3?
And because it is a much more flexible product, and I think there is more competition for it.
So is there a shortage of this kind of product on the market?
Well, it's more thinly traded, certainly, than a bucket 3 or an unbundled product. But it is still available.
It is, and I think the bucket 1 that we asked for in our open season was really geared towards we're offering long-term contracts for new projects to be constructed, because our needs really, we don't have a lot of need for bucket 1 in the next few years. Our need doesn't start until about 2017, 2018. So we're really looking for different types of projects, and there's a lot of interest in that, a lot of solar developers looking for a home. So that's a very active market. The bucket 2 is a little bit more of a intermediate, shorter term market, and it's active, but you don't see people, banging on your door trying to find a home for their power.
Thank you.
Director Green.
On bucket 2, that's bundled, and so what is bundled is energy on one hand and renewable energy certificates on the other? Is that what the bundle constitutes the bundle?
Yeah, and there's really kind of one or two key differences that differentiate bucket 1 versus bucket 2. So bucket 1, primarily it's a locational issue. So bucket 1 are predominantly resources located within the state of California, within its geographic boundaries. There are a couple of other conditions that apply and would make a resource eligible as well, but those are, I think, less relevant for this discussion. On the other hand, bucket 2, those resources are predominantly located out of state, but in close proximity to the state, so that they could deliver to the state of California. And then the other difference between the two products is really an issue of timing. And so with bucket 1, the renewable attribute and the energy are contemporaneously delivered.
The attribute's the REC.
Yes.
Okay. That's
The REC, correct.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So the REC and the energy are contemporaneously delivered. And with the bucket 2 product, the seller to their benefit, and the buyer, to their benefit as well, have flexibility as to how that energy is delivered with the renewable energy certificate. So, for example, you will receive renewable energy certificates as they're intermittently produced by some wind farm in Washington or Oregon. But the supplier will have flexibility as to when they deliver the actual electric energy to you. So as a buyer, it's great, because if you need a flat block of energy or you need a certain shape associated with that energy, you can get that shape, which isn't typically associated with the renewable generator, which is really nice when you're trying to serve a customer's energy requirements. And so they, as Greg mentioned, they kind of repackage that energy with the renewable energy certificate, and it's treated as a bundled resource in the eyes of the state of California. So hopefully that doesn't.
And then what about bucket 3, since you're on it?
Bucket 3 is really the simplest of the renewable portfolio standard eligible products to describe, and that is purely a renewable energy certificate that's detached from the electric energy itself. It's an unbundled renewable energy certificate. It very much has all of the attributes associated with that. As the owner of a renewable energy certificate, you own the emission reductions, you own the fact that renewable energy was produced, you have that certificate, you can retire it for compliance purposes, so it's valuable in that sense, but there is no electric energy that's delivered with that particular product by the supplier. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions or discussion on this item? Members of the public? Okay. So I need a motion.
Second?
A motion and second. All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? That matter carries. Item 9, energy efficiency update. Becky.
Good evening, board and members of the public. I'm trying to be quick this evening. I know we have a full agenda. But there are a few good things that we get to talk about. I wanted to touch on our small commercial program and give you a pipeline update to let you know where we're at. Similar with the multifamily program. A small update on PACE. I know we talked about that a bit at the last meeting. And then a really exciting discussion about our portfolio planning for 2016 and beyond. So to start things off with the small commercial pipeline update, we have 77 completed projects at this point. This means projects that have come through the pipeline and for which we have issued a rebate, which is pretty exciting numbers. These are both across Richmond and Marin County, and I'm sorry to say that I don't have that breakout right in front of me. That is a result of 731 audits, however. So as happy as we are about those 77 completed projects, we would love to see those numbers increase. Of those 731 audits, 170 of those were completed in the city of Richmond, and 561 of those were completed in Marin County. So we've been out hitting the pavement and doing a lot of work under that small commercial program. As I mentioned, we would love to see a higher conversion rate of audit to completed project. And so there's a number of things that we've been doing in conjunction with our program partners to try and get those projects to convert. One thing that provides a really compelling case right now is the fact that the 2014 Energy Efficiency Code comes into effect on July 1st, 2014. Some of you who have been tracking this may know that this was delayed initially. This building code was supposed to take place in January of this year, but because the non-residential energy efficiency building code represents a 30% increase in energy efficiency over the existing building code, such a significant gap that the industry really requested a little bit more time to comply with that. There are a lot of changes to the way these small commercial energy efficiency programs will have to do business as a result of these codes. A really straightforward example is a lot of things that we used to be able to provide incentives for no longer will be eligible for incentives because the CPUC does not allow you to incent something that is currently required by law. We're working with the CPUC to try and demonstrate that just because something is law doesn't mean it's reality. And we're hopeful that there will be some loosening on that regulation. But currently the way this system is structured, that's the policy. So that will take away a lot of potential for projects from what's already a really constrained market. In addition to that, some projects that would have been very straightforward to do before code compliance now will trigger additional requirements that wouldn't have been triggered beforehand. This is a really great tactic from a mandate point of view. If someone comes in for a significant remodel, you can use that as an opportunity to require other energy efficiency measures to be installed, thereby bringing up the efficiency of all building stock. But it does make it more challenging to get projects done in the first place. So we are facing the fact that projects that would have been a lighting change out now may also have to include controls and some other technologies that add to the cost, add to the scope. And often some of these projects which might not have had to get a permit now do have to get a permit. And that also adds to the cost. So these are all things that we're trying to be in front of. We've actually been working very closely with the County of Marin. The folks at the County Sustainability Department have been working very hard to get up to speed on the code, to work with local building departments, to help them understand the code compliance changes and to try and streamline projects like the ones we're recommending, which are very, very similar. A lot of times we'll have a lot of the same type of project. So those are things that we've been actively working on actually since about November of last year. We're very confident that we've made a lot of headway. Nonetheless, it does provide a compelling message for folks who have an audit but have not yet gone through the project. You know, we can tell them you have about 3 weeks to really get this through the door before things change, and it's going to be a lot harder. And it's possible that some of those audit reports may have to be revisited due to the changes in code as well. So that's currently the messaging that we're working on. The contractor workshop is something I'm excited about. We're working alongside PG&E for this one. We have found that it would be helpful for us to have a lot more contractors who do the work in the communities aware of the program and participating in the program, so they can also bring their projects to us. It works just as well as working with the customers in a lot of cases. The contractor workshop that we're doing June 17th is in conjunction with a lighting contractor, but we've been working very hard at MCE to try and get more HVAC contractors on board as well, because we think this will really help make sure that we get those more comprehensive savings. Another thing that we're working on doing is increasing the incentives to encourage the projects. We've worked with PG&E, who initially proposed an incentive change. We're going to try it in the East Bay and see how it works. That's where the incentive proposal design came. So the City of Richmond is increasing the incentives to match the East Bay design, and we're watching the impact and seeing if that does have a tangible result. The way that they have initially proposed the incentive increase is based on business size, which I think is a good strategy. So the smaller businesses will have a 43% increase in the incentive, but the larger businesses will actually have a reduction in the incentive that they would be eligible for. And that way we can really help make up the gap for these small mom and pop stores that are operating on very slim margins. The San Rafael Chamber of Commerce is something I'm excited to talk about too. Megan on our staff has been working very closely with the Green Committee of the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce to see if there's a way to use this trusted messenger as a way to get the word out about the program, and really especially take some of those audits that we've done and get those converted into actual projects. So the Chamber has been working with us very closely for many months now to develop an outreach campaign that we're just starting to launch in the next couple of weeks. As part of that outreach campaign, folks from the Chamber will actually be calling Chamber members who have received an audit through our program but have not actually converted and closed on a project. And we're hopeful that using that messaging from the Chamber itself, including members who have gone through projects and have positive experiences to report back, will really help get some of those folks back in the door and interested in completing a project. In addition to reaching out to folks who have already received an audit, we'll also be reaching out to the larger membership in general, making them aware of the opportunity through this trusted messenger avenue, and offering audits throughout the beginning of July. So we're hopeful that that will again help to really increase conversion rates from audits to projects, and that's something I can report back on likely in August. Moving on to the multifamily program, we can tell that we're getting into construction season now. We had 4 new projects come in the door in the last 2 weeks. Another thing that we're finding is that word of mouth continues to be our most consistent and effective form of outreach for this program. A lot of what we're seeing is that one project will come through managed by a property owner, and once they have a positive experience, they'll start to bring multiple properties that they manage into the program as well, which is a really encouraging step. Another thing that we're finding is that a lot of these projects like to have a phased approach where they're ready to do some scope initially, but they aren't necessarily ready to touch the whole building at one point in time. So we've actually updated our rebate reservation form to allow for some phasing in a project. So we'll commit to holding a certain amount of incentive aside for that project as long as they show progress towards completion. And so this is something that we think is innovative and will really help to get some of those projects in the door, because property owners can be daunted by the concept of doing so much at one point in time. Another thing that we recently accomplished in the multifamily program is a direct install training. As you may recall, we have a contract with Marin City Community Development Corporation. They help to train and staff our direct install team. The direct install team are the folks who actually go into the tenant units and provide certain energy efficiency measures for free. So we make sure that no matter what work we're doing on a multifamily property, there's an opportunity for the tenants to also participate in the energy savings. We have had great success with that program in the sense that the people that we're training and hiring and providing on-the-job training for are finding full-time employment elsewhere. We consider that a success to our program because we're really helping to provide this interim employment and get folks experience and get them out the door. So we're in the incredibly fortunate circumstance of having to provide a new training in May so that we can get some new good folks in the door. The numbers I'm providing here are cumulative. We had 40 workers trained over the scope of the project, including 7 who received on-the-job training. And we've also provided employment and training to 5 returned youth. These pictures are actually from the last training. We had, I think, 13 folks who participated in that one, and the feedback that I've heard is that is the highest caliber of class we've had yet. So we're really encouraged about the folks who are going to be coming into the program as a result of this. And it was fun because this training, previously we worked with the Association for Energy Affordability, who are really good partners. They do multifamily training across the country. My favorite thing to say about them is that they did literally write the book on training for energy efficiency in multifamily. This time we mixed it up a little bit and brought the folks from AEA to Marin City, and the training was held at Marin City Community Development Corporation. And that was kind of fun because that's an old, I'm not sure how many of you have been there, it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful building, but it's definitely Victorian style era building, a lot of opportunity for efficiency upgrades. So we actually walked around and did some work on their facility. They had a kitchen where we were able to switch out some of the aerators, and so that's some of what you see here, is the actual like hands-on ability to try out the tactics. On a less optimistic note, I wanted to talk a little bit about PACE. I believe last month what I'd mentioned is that the governor's office had worked with the legislature to establish an insurance program to try and mitigate the FHFA's concerns about residential PACE. As a brief update on this, PACE is a program which serves as a senior lien on a property, and because it is a senior lien, it subordinates all other liens, including, importantly, mortgages. Because of this nature of those programs, the FHFA has been very cautious about that and has indicated that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae cannot purchase a mortgage which has a PACE assessment on the property, cannot finance a mortgage on a property which has a PACE assessment. So the governor's office worked with the legislature to establish an insurance plan which they hoped would mitigate those concerns about impact on the value of those securities, the secondary market of mortgages. Unfortunately, the FHFA rejected that proposed insurance plan in the sense that they said, thank you, this is very nice, this does not change our position. So that hasn't had an impact on the programs that are planning on moving forward with residential PACE in Marin. However, so California First is still planning on launching a residential PACE option. They're currently reaching out to those jurisdictions which have approved California First in their area to work with them and make them aware of the opportunity. The risk as it is currently is that, or the way we've seen this risk take place in the market currently through Sonoma and a handful of other jurisdictions who already have residential PACE, is that when a homeowner with a PACE assessment tries to sell their property, they aren't able to get a mortgage finance on that property until the assessment is settled. So often it's worked into the cost of the purchase. So that is the risk that folks are facing, and this is a conversation that we'll be bringing to jurisdictions in the coming month. Yeah.
We've worked with our congressional representatives to put pressure on FHFA. This has been going on for 5 years now. It's kind of tiresome.
Yeah.
You know, it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming we've done that, but I'm just curious whether we've attempted to. Have we gotten any support from our reps?
Yeah. This is actually something I worked very actively on at the California Energy Commission when I was there. And every level of California representatives have been working very closely, not only with FHFA, but also with the Department of Energy, with the Obama administration, throughout. There have been very supportive reps. The problem is that the FHFA will not budge on the senior lien issue. They've indicated that they'll come to the table to talk if it's a junior lien program, but they will not budge on the senior lien issue.
Now, are there any bills pending? You know, there's periodically efforts to reform Fannie and Freddie. I wonder if there's any legislation pending that we could get something in that would be helpful?
Yeah,
Go around.
that's a really good point. I believe that there is a bill pending this year. I believe virtually every year since 2010, there has been a bill at the federal level to address this issue. So I can talk to the folks at Sonoma, who I know track this very actively, and find out for July if there is a bill in the legislature and if there's something we could do to take a supportive stance for that.
That'd be helpful, thank you.
Absolutely, it's a good suggestion. Sandwiching the bad news with the good news. I wanted to talk about our portfolio planning for 2016. Just as a brief update for this overall process, as many of you are aware, we received funding from the California Public Utilities Commission via an application cycle. We're currently in the midst of the 2013-2014 application cycle, and we're in the process of requesting a funding extension for 2015. They've offered up this process of a funding extension for 2015 because they're moving towards a very different way of doing business in 2016 and beyond, where they're actually shifting to a 10-year portfolio cycle. I'm very supportive of this move on the CPUC. I think it sends the right market signal to all of the actors that energy efficiency is something the state wants to invest in a long-term nature. It paves the way for long-term contracts. I think in general it's a very positive thing. And it gives us an opportunity to really have a good time frame to work forward with our community in developing a plan for 2016 and beyond. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, we're really making an effort in the energy efficiency side of the shop to have our 2016 plan be as grassroots as possible. The first step of this was a few weeks ago, we had, or I guess just last week, we had an invite-only meeting for stakeholders from various backgrounds. We worked really hard to make sure we had folks from multifamily, single family, folks from labor were there, all across the gamut. And you can see here we also had a brown bag from our own amazing Don Weiss, which was a real good draw for a lot of the people there to attend, to really get a chance to ask some questions about MCE and energy efficiency and how it fits into the long-term plan. All of the staff on our team did an incredible job pulling this meeting together. It was very smooth. We had a lot of very positive feedback. And everyone who attended agreed to be part of an ad hoc committee moving forward so that we could reach out to them and vet program plans with them. So that was also a really positive outcome. There wasn't a single person who said, oh gosh, you know, I'm too busy for this. What we did in preparation for this meeting was prepare a packet of information with a lot of information about energy use characteristics in this county. Not only how we're using energy on a sector-by-sector basis, you know, is residential the biggest component of energy use, is commercial the biggest component of energy use, but we also looked at things such as building characteristics. How old is our building stock, both from commercial and residential building stock? What kinds of businesses tend to be the most dominant in different areas? And because we had just done this implementation plan, or the feasibility study for the County of Napa, we were also able to include a lot of good information about Napa in this as well. Overall, it was a really productive meeting. We were able to develop some good, strong guiding principles for what should govern energy efficiency program design here in the county. Our next steps on this are to actually take that, use the energy use characteristic data, and sort of compile that into a set of straw proposals. Our plan at this point is to bring those straw proposals to public workshops. The first one is planned for June 23rd in the city of Richmond. We've reserved a room at Richmond City Hall for that. Word will be going out about that shortly. The second workshop that we plan currently, I believe, is July 25th. I would actually have to check those dates, but it's the third week of July, and that's going to be at the county building. In addition to these two that we're hosting and that we're working to facilitate, we'll also be working with a lot of different organizations right now to see if we can piggyback on their meetings and present it at those meetings. So we're thinking things like Marin Conservation League or the Environmental Forum. We're working with the folks from Resilient Neighborhoods. If you have or know contacts where you think this would be a great place to bring the plan, let me know. I would love to work with other organizations to get the word out. We want to get as much community feedback on this as possible. Ultimately, we're working for a deadline of August or September to have a fairly thoroughly vetted plan and be able to move into the actual machinations of developing the program implementation plans and the E3 calculators and all the other sort of things that you need to make it fit into the CPUC regulatory framework. That time frame is subject to some change. We had thought at this point, based on CPUC documents, that we would have had a proposed decision on 2015 funding. That has not yet come. I have been working with Energy Division of the CPUC and with different commissioners' offices, and we actually don't even have an indication of when that's going to come. So that has already been delayed almost a month, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it get delayed a little more. And so I can assume that that's going to have the same impact on the 2016 process. So that was the last of my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Becky. With respect to the small commercial projects and multifamily projects, what are your goals for the current year? What were they, and are you on track to meet those, either with the amount of savings, the number of projects, or whatever?
Sure. So we had goals set in a few different ways. There were energy savings goals, there were a number of projects goals, and things like that. We're very far from our energy savings goals on the commercial side, and I'm very concerned that we're going to meet them. We're not alone in that. All of the local government partnership programs that have very similar program design and targets in serving these small commercial programs are finding that the potential that used to be there isn't there anymore, and that it's very difficult to get those small mom and pops to sign on to larger projects. So that's a challenge that we're facing across the state, and our program is no different.
Can you quantify what that means?
I don't have those targets right in front of me, but we're like maybe 10%, I think, something along those lines.
And at this point in the year,
I can get you like real numbers in terms of kilowatt hour savings after the meeting.
just wanted a sense of it. So you're 10%, but at this point in the year, you thought you'd be
way further than that.
I see. Okay.
The multifamily program, we aren't very far along in energy savings. We're probably closer to 25%, but we have committed a lot of projects that we think will really help close that gap. They just tend to have longer lead times. And in terms of number of projects and number of units treated, we've actually blown those figures out of the water. So for 2016, we may have to look at the number of savings per unit assumptions that we included in 2013, 2014, and make some adjustments there.
How's on-bill financing going?
The on-bill financing is a struggle. We have been, I think there are some program design problems that we could work on for those. For the small commercial multifamily, it's possible that the minimum size constraint leaves a lot of the small commercial projects out that would otherwise be able to apply. So we have a $10,000 floor for the on-bill financing for multifamily and small commercial, and a lot of the small commercial projects are coming in lower than that. So we have identified the projects that have audit reports that recommend a larger scope than that, and we're actually going back and working with those projects to see, were you aware of this financing option? Does this help move you forward? It's very challenging in that sector, however, because a lot of times these are tenants, and they aren't comfortable taking on a 5-year loan for a business when such an uncertain time horizon. So I think we're learning as we go with that one about what makes sense in this marketplace. For the single family, we just started marketing the program in April, so I'm optimistic that we'll get some movement on that soon. We were a little hesitant to move forward fully with marketing because, as you may recall, we've been working with PG&E to make sure that there's an option for non-MCE customers to have this on their bill as well, which we believe we're finally resolved. We just had our technical testing for that go through in the last couple of weeks, so it's finally on track to finish. So with that program, we did start a full advertising campaign in April. Since that advertising campaign launched, we've been referring folks to the Home Upgrade Advisor service by the Bay Run as a phone number so they can call, learn more about the program, learn about the rebate program. The most recent numbers we have on that, close to 44 folks that they have referred to us for the loan program. And then on top of that, 11 folks that actually called into them already knowing about the program and interested in hearing more about it. So that was throughout the month of April and May. These projects do also have a little bit of a longer lead time because we're requesting they work with the contractor and get an energy report before coming to apply for a loan. So we're tracking that and we'll see. My suspicion with the single family program is that the home upgrade program, which we're trying to leverage for financing, is maybe just too complex to be ready for full-scale adoption. It takes a lot of time and effort and investment. And we're wondering if it might be a good idea to have an option for any energy efficiency project to come in the door. So let's say if you just want to do installation and building envelope, but you're not ready to do the full rebate program, there might be an option there as well. So
is that feasible under the financing program?
I think it's feasible, and the bank is certainly interested. They're interested in volume more so than specific type of project. The question will be whether or not the CPUC is willing to entertain that. So what we're doing right now, what we're planning on doing soon, is working with the folks who actually field those calls from the public to see if they can collect some data and maybe actually go back and call some of the people, see if they're considering a project, see why they are or are not considering a project, and use that to inform some program design changes. So that's something that we're going to try to launch over the next month.
Further questions for Becky on her update? Members of the public? Very comprehensive as always. Thank you, Becky. And do keep us posted on the details. That's very helpful as we have more questions going forward, particularly that 2015.
Yes.
Okay, item 10, communications update.
Good evening.
Pinch hitting, huh?
Yeah, I'm filling in for communications director being Kentucky, so please be gentle. So, I know you've been hearing a lot about good old AB 2145. 2145, by the way, is my favorite odd number these days. I want you to know that even as we as an agency are bobbing and weaving with 2145, we're still out there hustling and bustling, moving and shaking, wheeling and dealing. Especially when it comes to our Deep Green Champions. And with some help, I'd love to show you a video that we just released, another one of our micro-documentary videos about our Deep Green Champions. It's really good that we already have like a popcorn ready.
Harnessing the energy that's somewhat free and floating around us all the time is really attractive to me in terms of preserving the environment, preserving the planet for future generations, and reducing our impact on the earth every day. 100% renewable energy, something that I've always wanted to have, but it felt out of reach until Green Clean Energy.
The challenges that some businesses feel they have when it comes to energy is they think it's complicated, and it really isn't. My experience with MCE has been absolutely fantastic. Being in the Deep Green program with MCE means that we are using 100% renewable energy.
Clean energy is important to me because the community that we serve is affected by a lot of pollution. My experience with MCE has been great. By having MCE in our communities, it gives our families a choice to support clean energy in our communities.
One of the other benefits of working with MCE is there's a level of trust, knowing that they change the price one time a year as opposed to 4.
We were looking to run our surf shop on renewable energy long before Green Clean Energy came about, but it just didn't pencil out. For us, it's an extra $1 a day to have 100% renewable energy, the Deep Green option.
The customers at Equator really appreciate the fact that we're 100% renewable, and it really fits with the kind of things that we value at Equator, like providing organic coffee and fair trade coffee. Well, energy is just another way we can be sustainable.
It's really quite exciting to know that one can do business and still not harm the environment and help it every single day.
So that's just a taste. That's only a couple of our businesses that are chosen 100% renewable energy. And my family has a couple of small businesses in the East Bay. They don't have that option. I'm sure would like it. Although that could be changing. Are there any questions? Okay. Hold on. Let's just get all that information on there. So the MC and PG&E joint cost comparison. This is a bit of compulsory marketing at this point. So on June 9th, this cost comparison is going to be mailed out. It's going to reflect the most recent rate changes, and those include both the increased generation rates by PG&E and their decreased delivery rates. So on both sides of that equation, MCE customers do pretty well. For that reason, our customers collectively are currently saving almost $6 million. And that's just in this fiscal year. Get that on there. So again, it breaks down a little bit differently between our residential customers and our commercial customers. In both cases, there's a savings. It's more the differential is greater for the commercial customers than the residential customers, but in both cases, they're saving money on their electric bills now. And again, this is because our electric generation rates are cheaper. Are there any questions about this?
Do you average deep green with light green, or is this light green?
No, this is just light green.
This is just light green.
Yeah, so deep green is still a little bit more expensive, although less than it has been in the past. But for commercial customers, during winter months, deep green is actually cheaper.
Wow.
Ever so slightly, but cheaper nonetheless.
And that's with the PCIA too?
That's with the PCI baked into it.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. And so this is what it's going to look like when it arrives. This is the residential cost comparison. Oh, yes?
Yeah, could you tell me what the unspecified sources of power, 39% for light green is?
Sure, you'd like me to specify?
Well, it's kind of curious. It's a big number.
Yeah, so...
And why can't we specify?
Sure, so that's what's known as system power. That's system power is kind of the backbone of the grid, and there are certainly experts here that can probably articulate it better than I can. But so system power is the power that's already on the grid. It's you can't identify its source because it's already there. You can't identify whether an electron, once it hits the grid, came from a windmill or a natural gas power plant. So those purchases, you can't identify exactly where the energy comes from. So that's the part of the portfolio that is not renewable.
A little color?
Yes, please.
So to have a specified resource, you need to actually have a delivery contract from that resource to your load. And these are not those type of contracts.
But do we know the mix of it?
Kind of looks like we're hiding something.
You know, unfortunately, the California Energy Commission for quite a long while used to prepare a report annually that broke out the various fuel sources that contributed to the state's unspecified resource mix, and has since stopped doing that. And so now, kind of per reporting guidelines, this particular category is just to be referred to as unspecified. Now, if you're located in the state of California, as we are, that number is going to be predominantly tied to natural gas fuel sources. There will also be residual amounts of large hydro and even residual amounts of renewables, as well as, kind of, it's really a Heinz 57, if you will, but it's primarily natural gas that's going to be making up that number.
Okay. This is what the residential cost comparison looks like when it arrives at your door. It's got a breakdown of both light green and deep green. And the carbon factor is listed down here. I think you all have a copy of it in front of you too.
The public really found this useful last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, this went over.
And what's really kind of interesting about this whole CCA thing is that the public, I don't think, was getting anything like this before. I mean, the public wasn't getting messages saying, here's a breakdown, specified or otherwise, of where your energy is coming from. So this, I would say that something like this is just another benefit to public education around an issue that really matters.
Is this available on the website now?
Sorry?
Is this available on the website?
If it's not, we can make sure it is.
Okay. Maybe just email it out to us. So we can...
Sure, we can definitely email it out to you. And the website's going to be undergoing a big change in the coming months.
Just email it out to board members?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So, because MCE's generation rates are cheaper, we're saving money not just for residents and businesses, but for the cities that you folks are managing as well. So this is really fun because we get to talk about tax dollars. So often we're talking about ratepayer dollars, but now we're talking about the way ratepayer dollars become tax dollars. So the city of San Rafael in 2013 saved $30,000 on its electricity bill. And that was with rates in 2013. Since rates have gone up on the other side of the bill, it's going to be actually a greater savings this coming fiscal year. There have been, PG&E's had 2 rate increases, one at the beginning of the year and then one in May. So with those current rates and based on previous usage, we can actually approximate what the savings will be for 2014. And so for the city of San Rafael, it's about $47,000. City of Nevada is another example. And again, that $10,000 estimate for 2014 will probably be more than that, because that was actually based on previous rates before the increase. Richmond, as you can see, $60,000. And a great success story, I would say, here is the West County School District. And that $66,000, that could be another teacher they could hire. And again, this is just for 1 year. So, you know, we'll see what happens in the future. We don't have a crystal ball to know what rates will be in the future necessarily. But this is what it looks like now, and I think that's a really cool way of reminding people again that the costs of energy are embedded in every facet of our life. You know, ratepayers aren't just businesses and homes. They're churches, they're schools, they're governments. So again, this is I like talking about this stuff. Deep Green too. So kudos to Fairfax, a Deep Green city. Now, Fairfax, because Deep Green does cost a little bit more, in 2013 Fairfax spent approximately $1,700 to reduce their carbon footprint by 170,000 pounds of CO2. And that was in 2013. Just for the sake of comparison, had they been light green, they would have saved about $2,200. So that was kind of the difference between being light green and saving that money, or opting out and going for the deep green. But the news flash is that by today's rates, with those increases on PG&E side, it would only cost about $700 a year by comparison. So the cost of being 100% renewable has gone down. Who knows what will be next? It's possible that deep green could be cheaper too. Are there any questions about this? Yes, sir.
We don't anticipate any further during this year rate increases for PG&E. We do.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
There's a pending rate increase that is scheduled for approval sometime after July 1.
Any more?
I would expect, yeah, I mean, between July and December, I wouldn't surprise me if there was at least one more. They tend to have 3 to 5 rate changes per year since we started operation. That's what we've seen.
There's no way to capture those numbers in our communications, so it's premature.
Yeah, we can't say what the rate changes are going to be before they are approved by the CPUC. At the time they're approved, we can certainly let the press know.
Yeah, it would maybe even just be, even if we can't quantify it as part of our outreach, to make sure that, you know, when we make these comparisons, these are just comparisons, and that we expect the differentials to increase over time as PG continues to increase the rates.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, you know, the other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes PG&E rates go down. You know, we've seen that in the last couple of years of, in our early years of operation, we saw a couple of rate decreases. And so I think every time we do a rate comparison, we try to make the point very clearly that this is a point in time comparison. We can't control PG&E rates. We can't promise our rates will always be lower. We can just tell you what they are right now and what they've been in the past.
Fair.
And to keep in mind, though, that, you know, in a year of record-breaking drought, large hydro is going to be diminished, and so to the extent that PG&E continues to rely on large hydro and nuclear energy too, I don't imagine that there's going to be more nuclear facilities built in the size of active areas around here. To the extent that those are what PG&E is relying on, you know, it's going to be tough to expect that their prices are going to go down a lot. But another thing, when it comes to trying to predict what the rates will be, you know, there are many different rate categories, and so it's possible that PG&E could raise rates in some rate categories and not others, and so then that kind of puts us in a bind if we're saying they're going down. You know, I think it's better to manage expectations when it comes to that stuff.
What you can say is that they're stable, ours are stable for a year.
Yeah, yeah. And that's meaningful too. To be able to provide rate stability is something, especially coming from fairly small business owners, that means a lot. Are there any other questions? Moving along then. Again, we just wanted to put our events list for the year so far. When I was talking about moving and shaking, this is just some of what it looks like. I'm not going to belabor the list, but if there are questions about it, I'd be happy to answer them. I will point out a couple of things here. So in February, we had a call with one of the superintendents of Marin County Schools. who we met, or we re-met, I would say, at the Marin Economic Forum, and they helped us organize a presentation to all of the district's facilities directors of the schools of Marin County. And your executive director did a phenomenal job presenting to them in May, and the Mill Valley School District actually graciously offered us their data to use as an example to their colleagues on what they would be saving if they through the light green service. And so there's a savings there of I think more than $10,000. So again, based on the experience of the West County School District, this is a great opportunity to show other districts the savings that are available in MCE. Another worth talking about, Marin Green Drinks in April. This is cool. So Marin Green Drinks is, I don't know if other folks are familiar with it, but it's kind of an informal gathering of eco-friendly folks get together to talk about the latest and greatest in the world of sustainability. And when we were there presenting, the owner of, so this was at Lotus of India, to give a plug, and Lotus of India is hosting us. The owner, who owns 2 other restaurants in Marin, loved what he heard so much that he opted up all 3 of his restaurants after that, so that was pretty fun. Let's see if there's any other good ones. Oh, 2 more I'll point out. Your Resource Procurement Director, Greg, teamed up with Bob Herbst of the San Rafael Airport to give a presentation to the Richmond Council of Industries about the feed-in tariff to remind property owners over there that they can capitalize on their investment by taking advantage of the best feed-in tariff in the neighborhood. Also, we presented to the Hayward Sustainability Committee because we got invited to do so. And I'll talk about this actually in a second about what's going on in the East Bay. But the reason why I point that out is because, one, part of that was a response to AB 2145. This is one of the reasons why, even though I want the bill to fail, I'm kind of a big fan of it. Because some city council folks and folks on the Sustainability Committee they felt like all of a sudden there's a sense of urgency. Like we need to know if we're going to lose our chance here to have meaningful energy choices. And so we presented to them, and in fact, something we'll get to later about what happened at the Board of County Supervisors in Alameda County was that one of the city council members, who's actually just got elected mayor of Hayward, came there to push the county to start moving forward with the CCA in the East Bay. So it's really cool, and I think really good validation for this agency that those kinds of conversations are happening. Are there any questions about the events list? Andale pues. Some big sponsorships are coming up. The Marin County Fair is going to be largely sponsored by MCE. This is one of the biggest sponsorships we've done to date, and it's going to include a lot of cool things like a solar-powered carousel. We're putting our money where our merry-go-round is. We're also going to be sponsoring the solar stage. We did a similar bike-powered stage at a Richmond event last year, which is really cool. This really helps the public connect with what we're doing. I feel like there's a lot of disconnect, especially when it comes to any infrastructure issues, whether it's water, energy, certainly. But when people can kind of see and experience MCE, it's all the better. I think that's one of the greatest ways we can reach the public. So, a couple details here that I won't belabor too much, but we're going to be publicized in all of the county fair's materials through signs, advertising. The mailer for the Fair magazine reaches almost 100,000 sets of eyes. So this is a great way to get some real good local exposure. And again, CCA is conceptualized as a very localizing phenomenon. And so it's really cool to see the local CCA sponsoring the county fair. Are there any questions about that? Okay. We're also going to be sponsoring the film night in the park since the weather's getting good. Before each movie, there's going to be a preview, and it's going to be a lot like the video you saw earlier. So they're actually going to be showing one of our micro-documentaries before each movie, and also acknowledgments for MCE on the screen before each movie. So again, another way of connecting with the public. Any questions about sponsorship? Okay. So CCA and new communities. So this is a big one. On Tuesday, the Alameda County Board of Supervisors allocated $1.5 million to begin developing a CCA. Now, first it's going to be for the technical feasibility study, but $1.5 million is probably more than they need for that. So we're probably going to be going to program development as well. It was a unanimous vote. I was actually there for the vote. It was unanimous. There was a ton of support there. I don't think anyone voiced any opposition. There were a lot of thoughtful questions from the board. And again, as I said, the incoming mayor of Hayward was there to make sure that it went through. Later that evening, at the Oakland City Council meeting, and we haven't heard a lot from Oakland about CCA, but that night at the Oakland City Council meeting, they unanimously passed a resolution opposing AB 2145. So it's pretty cool to see that happening. I know the governor has a soft spot in his heart for the city of Oakland, so you know, who knows how that'll play out. Are there any questions about this? Oh, there was one thing I wanted to mention. So the city of Albany and the city of El Cerrito have both been exploring the possibility of joining MCE, and that Albany and El Cerrito is the border between Contra Costa County and Alameda County. So Albany decided to wait and see what the Board of County Supervisors was going to do, and one of their staff members was there at the meeting too. They're going to be deciding this later this month on whether or not they're going to continue to wait. And by the way, Alameda County expects it to be a 3-year process. So, you know, there's going to be a carbon cost opportunity associated with that. And that's 3 years, assuming that it all goes smoothly. I was born and raised in Alameda County, so I feel like I can say that things don't always go smoothly there. You know,
I'm with you on that.
You know, the city of Oakland is kind of its own county. The city of Berkeley is kind of its own planet. So we'll see what happens. But later this month, we should know from Albany what their next steps will be. El Cerrito, I think, plans, from what their staff tells me, to address the issue in July. Are there any questions about this?
From the public?
Yes.
Thank you. I arrived here tonight from the city of San Mateo, where I'm a planning commissioner.
Welcome.
And thank you. Very interested here in hearing everything that I'm hearing. And we recently, the city council created a new sustainability commission. And I'm very encouraged by seeing that you actually have made presentations to, for instance, the Hayward Sustainability Committee. And I'm wondering, I have good connections both there in the city of San Mateo and with the county of San Mateo. Several of the supervisors I'm quite close with, and I'm wondering, could we get presentations there so that we can think about joining? Is this something we can do?
I think this is something that we could probably do.
Okay, good. Then I need to get your clear.
Okay.
We'll trade our information.
All right. As long as we get invited.
You'll be invited.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that was the invitation.
Thank you. And congratulations on appointment to the committee.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I think that that's good. Thank you.
Great, Alex, thank you. Just to be careful, any further questions from the public? No? Okay, thank you for the presentation.
Oh, we did have one more video we could show. 2 minutes.
Let's do it.
Helping others has always been part of my life. I'm moved by the work I do when I see the product of it all in the community. The Marin City Community Development Corporation is a nonprofit organization that is located in Marin City. As we grow in this community and as we expand, we want people to have a stakehold in what we do every day. That includes all of us being more energy efficient and much more environmentally responsible. Marin City is a very interesting community, and it faces a number of barriers to workforce, to jobs, to asset development, and to services for mental health. Our partnership with MCE has been a result of our continued involvement and understanding of the future of jobs here in Marin County and beyond, and those are energy efficiency jobs. We developed a workforce training program here in Marin City where we invited residents to come in and learn about energy efficiency. Once MCE identifies a multi-family complex, they invite the direct installation team to go into those units and provide outreach by educating the residences there about the services they can provide. That could include replacing shower heads, aerators, and light bulbs with free energy efficient models. In the future, the communities who create green jobs are going to be beautiful. I have a vision of Marin City where we're creating green jobs in this community and we're teaching our children how to do it. And it's not that far in the future. It's something that we need to be dedicated to, and it needs to be something that's a part of the entire community.
Okay, item 11, regulatory and legislative update.
Good evening, board. Good evening, public. I'm Jeremy Wayne, the regulatory analyst, and I don't get up here often, but with all the hype about the legislative front, I thought it was time to give you all a little update on what's going on in regulatory, because unfortunately, regulatory never sleeps, and there are some boogeymen over on that side of the fence as well, so we need to worry about. So our presentation tonight is focusing on two topics. What's formerly been called the green option, which is now called the Green Tariff Shared Renewables Program and Enhanced Community Renewables Program. So two more acronyms for you there. And then also a little bit at the end about the upcoming long-term procurement planning cycle. So the Green Tariff Shared Renewables Program, what was that mouthful? Essentially, it is a premium rate that the utilities will be able to offer that is similar to our light green, or has the potential to be similar to either our light green or deep green products. In essence, it's just a premium rate that has a higher renewable content than the default option that PG&E or SDE or San Diego offer to customers. So this, in one sense, is a very good thing because it's expanding the access to renewable electricity for the broader state, for the broader ratepayer base. But it's also a bit of a drawback for CCA development in other communities because it's essentially enabling the utilities to provide a product that can directly compete with the premium green products that the Green CCA offers. And then the other acronym that pairs with this is the Enhanced Community Renewables Program. And this is also a premium product, the higher renewable content, but it has an added factor that it's a local product. So this is most similar to our Soul Shares program, which we're just getting off the ground. And how they define local and how we define local are very, very different. And even how each of the three utilities defines local has some, at least in their proposals, has been very different. So we're waiting for the commission to really interpret that word from the legislature. But at this point, it's a discussion of within a 10-mile radius of where the customers are located, or the community in which the customers are located. So maybe not quite as local as our actual Soul Shares program. And so our concerns with this, both of these products as proposed are, we have quite a few concerns, I would say. But the primary one was something that there's a piece of statute, first I should mention, called SB 43, that's already been approved from a prior cycle that directs the utilities to propose these programs for certification from the Public Utilities Commission. And I'll get a little bit into we'll cover the chronology later to explain how that all fell into place. But as that bill was being devised, we were able to get a little bit of language in there that helped to not just protect CCAs, but really protect all customers that don't want to participate in this program. So even, say, PG&E's bundled customers that don't want to participate in this program, it's in essence that there are going to be all sorts of costs tied with launching these programs, marketing these programs, purchasing the electricity to supply these programs, and there need to be protections prohibiting those costs from being passed back to customers that didn't want this thing there in the first place. So that's the key concern, but there have been some other ones as well about the transparency of the costs and the limits of costs. Another lesson learned from the past was Prop 16, where PG&E shareholders gave a blank check to try to get that proposition passed, and without getting into all the details, there are some differences between the different utilities proposals, and one of the things that PG&E generously offered is that any overages in their administrative and marketing costs, so any expenses in their administrative and marketing that they cannot recover from participants in the program, because they have an underwhelming number of participants in the program, they will then recover from their shareholders, which usually their shareholders are very stingy with their money and they don't want to spend or let the utility frivolously spend. But as I said, with Prop 16, there have been a few examples where if this is going to swat out the competition, sure, spend as much as you need, get it done. So that's another angle that we're particularly concerned with. There's also the case that all three utilities are proposing for the startup of their programs, that they will borrow existing facilities that they've already contracted to meet the renewable portfolio standard requirements. There is, as we know with our own procurement, there's some time lag, and you procure contracts in advance of anticipated need, and so the utilities, while they ultimately have to reach the 33% RPS mandate, they have time to do so, and they are able to shuffle some contracts around without being out of compliance, still being above the interim targets. But essentially what they're trying to do here is they're trying to have contracts ready to go at no real, still having the cost of the power, but no cost for the review of the contracts, the bidding and solicitation process, having all that already done so that day one they can offer this program to customers and immediately start supplying them. Now, the way that we go about that is that we go through thorough studies and we come up with a projection of how many customers do we anticipate will take our service, in our case with the opt-out mechanism, how many people will opt out, how much power or electricity is that going to require, and then we go out and get contracts to meet that with some wiggle room. And it's a rather laborious process, as we all know. In this case, they're citing this as being advantageous because it's quick and easy and that they already have these contracts lined up, and if they end up with too many, well, they'll just push it back to their renewable portfolio standard and get all the other ratepayers to pay for it. The problem is that just what I illustrated, that any other market participant does not have this broad bundled portfolio to borrow from as needed. And that gives them a strong competitive advantage towards any CCA forming or any CCA expanding and having to find new procurement. There are some other angles. So let's see, revisions. So at the initial launch, the utilities it varies from utility to utility, but they're being somewhat modest about how large they want these programs to be. The statute itself that enables these programs has a firm cap on how large these programs can be statewide, but the utilities, to varying degrees, are proposing a smaller first step, and they want to then expand it as enrollment picks up and as they see it being a successful program. But the way that they are suggesting to expand it or to revise rates is all through an advice letter process that has a very little amount of oversight. And it's really just a dialogue between the utility and the Public Utilities Commission, with very little opportunity for any other parties to step in and say, hey, wait a second, those numbers seem very wrong, or why are they suddenly adding in all these contracts when their participation's been really low, or why are they authorizing another $1 million in marketing when they only have 1,000 participants in the program, or that sort of thing. So what we're pushing for is that any major revisions to these programs should be part of a formal process at the Commission, a formal application process. The same way these initial programs are being vetted by multiple parties, any revisions there down the road would also be vetted. And then there's the chilling effect, which is something we've already seen. In this case, it's really the clearest example we have is with Clean Power SF and how that's pretty much stalled out. And even in the direct transcript for the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, as they were reviewing their rates, they cited the pending legislature for SB 43 that would enable these programs as a reason why they want to hold off on implementing their CCA. And so, while we are worried about the legislation and the opt-in versus opt-out and all of that process, there's still this ongoing fear of if this is a already running program that the utilities have up and running, then why do we go ahead and set aside $1.5 million to perform a study to determine whether CCA is appropriate for our community and so forth? Just a lot easier, more convenient. But it may not be the best choice, really. As we've seen, CCAs create jobs, CCAs enable communities to retain money and within their communities and enable a broader sustainable practice than the way these programs would do. There's also in addition to just generally whether or not non-participants should bear any costs, there's also just the general fail-safe. What happens if PG&E launches this program and spends several millions of dollars advertising this program and 10 people show up? What happens then? Those 10 people can't pay for all the expenses that they've entered into. And as I mentioned, sure, the shareholders will step in, but there should be some limits, so they can't just spend $1 million to get 10 people in the program. But then also there's just that, what happens when the utility gives up? If there's an underwhelming response and they really realize that there's just not the market demand for this program, who pays for all the bills? And this was an example, another one, a real life example with the PG&E Climate Smart program, which back in, I believe, 2006, and was basically an opportunity for customers of PG&E to offset the carbon footprint that's tied with their electricity usage. This program had a very poor uptake, and PG&E attempted to resuscitate it several times through, and spent more and more and more money, and told the commission, no, we've only spent this amount. But once they finally put the stake in it and said it was done, then they had a third party come and review the numbers, and the third party found that PG&E had spent way more money relative to the number of customers, and had quite a few fewer customers than PG&E claimed they'd served with the program. So there's definitely some discrepancies that can occur between what the utility is claiming and what is actually happening with their programs. And so we very much want to make sure that there is adequate protection. In that case of Climate Smart, when that failed, all those extra costs ended up just being funneled into the bundled electricity rates that everyone had to pay to recover those costs. So that's something that we really don't want to see. That's also something that the Office of Ratepayer Advocates really doesn't want to see. They've been a strong ally with us in this proceeding, along especially the lines of ratepayer indifference and making sure that non-participants are not being dragged into being subject to all these costs. And then the last one, which I should go without saying really, is that these programs and the marketing of these programs need to comply with SB 790, which is the bill that protects, as many of you know from our history, the bill that protects CCAs from aggressive advertising and marketing from the utilities. And there's also there are something called the affiliate transaction rules, which is another construct at the commission that could be leveraged here to help to protect other market participants. And essentially the argument there is that this whole program should be operated by an affiliate that does not have the inherent knowledge and the inherent staff and resources that comes with just serving the bundled customer load that can be leveraged in ways to serve this specialized program.
So Jeremy, I mean, you're doing a really great job of outlining our concerns. I mean, we've been raising these for who knows how long.
I'll tell you how long.
So, cutting to the chase, so to speak,
yeah.
Where do things stand on the proceeding?
Well, I will, if you can bear with the anticipation for a little longer. I'll get there, I promise. Any other questions before we advance the timeline?
Again, I think you've crystallized, we know that these are the issues with the program. So yeah, and it sounds like the PUC was not necessarily seeing things our way before, so where are things at?
Things have turned around quite a bit. It's still kind of anyone's guess where the cards will finally fall, but it is, Damon was just alluding, this has been dragging on for a long time. San Diego started it off by filing an application to propose some sort of green premium product in January of 2012. PG&E followed in April. Our first glimmer of hope was in July of 2013, where we filed a motion with the Commission telling them that, look, you've got these two proceedings, they're both considering premium green rates. Utilities are asking for totally different things, but there's some fundamental questions about, is this legal? Can they offer these premium rates? Is this a policy that the Commission wants to be promoting? So let's evaluate that all together in one single proceeding. The Commission, we thought it was a long shot, but it was worth aiming for. The Commission granted it. Then, as a result of what was going on in both these proceedings, SB 43 came about. The Governor signed that off in September of 2013, and that ended up causing the regulatory process to restart in a way, because now the objective of these applications, rather than just reviewing whether what the utilities proposed was sound, now it's whether it complies with the law as well. And getting into, because of SB 43, it actually directed all three utilities to file these applications as well. So then Edison had to come along as a late entrant and file an application as well. One key thing to highlight is that SB 43 required the utilities to file a proposed program, both a Green Tariff Shared Renewable Program and an Enhanced Community Renewable Program. And what you'll see here is Edison, or San Diego at the start did both. PG&E only chose one. Edison only chose one as well. So then there was this ripple of, well, the Commission had to go back and tell them, no, you need to propose two programs, or you're just blatantly non-compliant. And so there have been several steps along those lines that leaded us up till closer to now. There were then steps to, as Edison's program came into the mix, they had to decide how to consider the earlier applications with the later applications. To give you an extent of just, I'm not even getting into the details of what happened in this proceeding, but in PG&E's case, we've had 3 different instances of evidentiary hearings in this proceeding. Usually there's one, if that. In smooth proceedings, they will waive hearings, parties will settle things in either through settlements or workshops, and everyone will sing kumbaya and be happy. But in this case, there's been so many procedural redirections and so much lack of information that the utilities provided in the first place that there's been a need to keep restarting these proceedings. And it's all under the pressure of the mandate that's in SB 43 that the Commission has to come to a final decision on these programs by July 1st of this year. So, given all these starts and stutters and restarts, and actually there's the most recent start and stutter, or restart, is that now there's an assigned commissioners ruling that came out last month that is saying that the, in part because Edison and PG&E did not provide robust proposals for their enhanced community renewable, their local renewable option, that they're going to punt that to later in the year. And they're going to evaluate all 3 utilities' enhanced community renewable programs later on in the year. And the way that the wording is phrased in SB 43, the Commission can do that and still be in compliance with the law. But they still have to make this July 1st date. And in fact, they're kind of meeting it. We have yet to see the proposed decision that would address the Green Tariff Shared Renewables program. But based on the last ruling that came along, we expect that to come out next Monday, June 9th, and that would set it up to actually reach the proper amount of time for public review and comment on on the proposed decisions, it wouldn't in fact be until July 10th. So they're kind of walking the line there about being out of compliance with law, but by July 10th, we should have some shred of resolution to this whole green tariff shared renewables debacle, and some sense of whether or not there are going to be these green premium programs that are going to be offered that will then be a competitive product to us. We'll see. I mean, one great glimmer of hope.
We don't mind competition. We just want, I think we've
want it to be
raised
fair.
legitimate issues.
Exactly.
Don, are we gonna, do we have any strategies around the ex parte meeting still?
Yeah, that is a strategy that we use at the appropriate time, and that's something that may be needed in the next month or so. And I think you're right that it's worth reminding everyone that our position on these types of programs has always been that we aren't looking to stifle competition. We support choice. That's really part of our DNA. But we've seen a lot of cost shifting happen in so many places with regards to PG&E and how they structure their rates and how they do cost recovery. And we see a lot of places in this program as it unfolds where that is very likely to happen, and there are no plans to prevent it from happening. And inadvertently, it will happen if we don't prevent it. So that's really been our main focus, is to make sure that the customers that choose this program are the ones that pay for it, and that our customers aren't paying for something they aren't receiving or having to pay twice for PG&E's program and our program.
I will say a couple of things. The main recurring theme that has come up time and again in this proceeding is that the utilities are providing as little information as they possibly can to get these applications through. Even to the point where the judge is having to call them out and say, where's this whole second section that's supposed to be in there? So it's extremely, the way that SB 43 has it set up, the commission has to determine that these programs are reasonable. And we, time and again, keep saying, there's not enough information here to make a fair judgment about whether or not it's reasonable. Now, there's a lot of political pressure behind approving these programs, too. So I expect something to be authorized here, but it's really anyone's guess how much revising and how much modification will take place by the judge in approving these programs. And to the point on the ex parte meetings, what we will discuss there hinges tremendously upon, I mean, we know our recurring concerns with this proceeding, but it'll hinge tremendously on what's in the proposed decision.
Right.
But we have taken the preemptive stance, and Martha, who's not here with us tonight, our regulatory assistant, did a wonderful job of setting up ex parte meetings with all 5 commissioners' offices over the course of 2 days. So we can be very efficient about this. And we timed it to be after the proposed decision is out, so we can really get in early after that, the week following the issuance of the proposed decision, enough time for people to digest it a little bit, but early enough that if there needs to be an alternate proposed decision, we can start leaning on commissioners to have that happen. If this needs to be held, it's very unlikely since they're already past the legislative deadline. But it is potential, there is a potential possibility for the proposed decision to be held the next voting meeting the following month. Who knows? The way that this has constantly repositioned itself the whole time, I would never bet on the outcome of this proceeding because it's too up in the air. Other questions?
General question or inquiry. Do these rates of these programs also have a PCIA component in it?
So there is a departing load charge for customers in these programs for any bundled costs that were entered into, assuming they remain bundled customers. So there are some components like that there is some similarity or parallelism between how CCA customers are handled and how customers in these programs would be handled. As far as the breakdown of costs, where we're really concerned is about how they're paying for overhead that corresponds to running these programs, how they split down the staff hours, and so they aren't borrowing from the overhead and the staff resources they have for their bundled customer service. But that is a component. And we will see with phase 3 I personally want to be as far from it as possible at this point. I think we've invested all too much of our time and resources, but unfortunately this is a very serious matter and a very significant proceeding for concerns of CCAs. But I think that the enhanced community renewable, I'd say first off, since we have our cell share program up and running, which I think is already a better example than any of the 3 proposals I've seen come out of the utilities, and then the fact that it's now been delayed yet again, our program will be up and running and serving customers, cross your fingers, long before any of these ECR programs get up and running for the utilities. And as Alex pointed out in the last segment, our cost comparisons very good as is, and these premium programs are premium program. They are going to cost more than PG&E's bundled service. So I do think that our light green, deep green, and soul shares programs are going to be very cost competitive to what ends up coming out of this. But we just need to make sure that the rates actually include all the costs associated with the program. Any other questions? One last little teaser on the second subject is the long-term planning, or long-term procurement planning proceeding. This happens every couple of years, every year. It's a process for the utilities to determine what contracts they're going to need to enter into to meet their load. And it does result in things like changes to the PCIA, changes to the cost allocation mechanism, CAM. And in the last go-around, we pushed and pushed and pushed to have some leeway, some room for us to not be subject to the cost allocation mechanism. For just a quick primer for those that are having to dig back in their memory to understand what that was about. That's about resource adequacy. As you know, we contract to procure our own resource adequacy to meet our need associated with our customers. And then every once in a while, a capacity resource that the utilities procure are granted a cost allocation mechanism status, which means that our customers are forced to take some of that capacity and forced to pay for some of that capacity. And it keeps ending up being dumped on our plates late in the game where we then have to sell off the capacity at a loss. It's creating market inefficiencies. So this is a glimmer of hope, I'll say, with the scoping memo that was just issued for the next long-term planning procurement proceeding. In phase 2 of this proceeding, there's this paragraph of language which I think is loose enough, broad enough, that there could be some very concrete movement on a self-provision for CCAs, so they don't need to be subject to CAM, and potentially even, I think there's enough wiggle room in the wording there that we can get a thing or two about the PCIA addressed in that proceeding as well. It's with the new commissioner, Commissioner Picker, and it's any guess how this proceeding will be conducted, but I think that thus far, he and his office have been very efficient about it and have been receptive to meeting with us. And one last little thing that's not on the slide, but the CCA-specific concerns, or the CCA and DA concerns, in the scoping memo, it allows for those concerns to be addressed in a separate decision from everything else, which is great because this proceeding is always a long, laborious proceeding. It usually has multiple decisions for the different tracks within the proceeding, and it would be great to get our issues addressed cleanly and in a streamlined fashion and be done with it. So let's hope.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to answer any questions or anything else in the regulatory world. Otherwise, we can finally get them legislated. I'm sure you're all eagerly awaiting.
You doing legislative as well?
No, I've been deep in the weeds of regulatory, so I can let the others worry about that instead.
I'll be taking that, and Shelly's going to chime in as she likes.
You've kind of been on the front line.
I think at this point it's a very solid team effort from everyone in MCE in various capacities.
Including many of our directors here this evening. We have big thank yous to many of you for the help you've been providing. So I'll start with a little background just to catch everyone up. There's a bill, AB 2145, that was introduced early in the year as a spot bill, and we started monitoring the bill in February. It had very benign language that was tied to CCA consumer protections, but really didn't have any meat on the bones of what they were looking to do. In April, the actual language was released, and it was released about a week before the bill was set to go to the Utilities and Commerce Committee. And the language that was released was would really fundamentally change or kill CCA activities in California on a going forward basis. It would structure CCA programs to operate as an opt-in program rather than an opt-out program. That's the primary problem with the bill. There's also some additional language in the bill that's worth mentioning, just so folks are aware, that has some reporting obligations that we don't necessarily have a problem with, because we love disclosure, we love transparency, but they are not worded in a way that's practical. They would require 5-year rate projections and comparisons to the utility. As we know, the utility rates aren't known 5 years in advance. The same is true for GHG emissions, so prospectively projecting what GHG comparisons would be and including the rates and GHG information in the filing of an implementation plan for a CCA that was launching. So that language is, from a practical standpoint, problematic, but the main concern that we have with the bill is the shift of CCA programs to be opt-in programs. And the fundamental issue with that, for those of you who haven't thought much about this yet, really you need to have a critical mass of customers before you can procure for them. You need to know that you're going to have a customer base before you can buy power. You need to know how much you need, and then also in order to finance the purchase of power, the folks that might be financing that for you need to know that you have someone that you're going to be selling that power to. It's hard enough to start a CCA when you already have that. So. Clearly, this change in law would make it impossible for CCAs to start. It's also worth noting, for those of you that aren't up to speed on the issue, other CCA programs around the country exist, and they're all structured as opt-out programs. And the original legislation in CCA that enabled CCA in California, AB 117 back in 2002, intentionally structured the program as an opt-out program. It was done at a time that the open market had just been shut down, and all the customers were really being handed back to the private corporations to serve. And it was really done as with an eye towards allowing for some type of choice to be available to customers through their local governments, so that they wouldn't have to only have the option of the monopoly provider. And at that time, the incumbent utility, the investor-owned utilities all supported the legislation being structured that way. So that's just a little bit of background. When the language was introduced in April, of course, we were extremely concerned and poured a lot of time into educating our staff, our board members, and also letting there were a lot of groups that were asking about the bill and the implications of the bill. And within a week, I think there were 40 opposing entities, which was really exciting. As of today, there are over 150 opposing entities, and I'll mention a few of them after I get a little further into the kind of the series of events. After this bill, I should mention, was authored by Assemblymember Bradford, who is the chair of the Utilities and Commerce Committee. That is the first committee that this bill went to, and as I said, it was scheduled. It was within a couple of weeks of when the language was released. It went to that committee, and although in the committee there was a very, very strong showing of opposition, folks were lined up out the door to speak. I think we had over 20, maybe 30 people speak in opposition, and multiple representatives from multiple jurisdictions, including Lancaster, who's getting ready to launch a CCA program. Sonoma Clean Power representatives were there to speak. We had Office of Ratepayer Advocates there, which is affiliated with the CPUC, there to speak. And there were no folks there to speak in support, except for the the folks that were sponsoring the bill, PG&E, the IBEW, and the Coalition of Electrical Employees, also called CUE. Despite the strong opposition voiced in that committee, the bill passed without any opposition. And it then went on to the Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee put the bill on suspense because they did find some costs to the state associated with the bill. The one category of costs that were identified were the CPUC implementation of the bill was going to be costly. It would require 1.5 to 2 positions to monitor the IOUs, managing of the opt-out process, and then also the new reporting obligations that were being contemplated. There would need to be a new proceeding, and that would add to staff costs. So there were some costs identified. Also, we put together some numbers that I thought were really helpful, and big thanks to our staff for pulling these together very quickly. We identified the savings to the state of taking power from us, and we have a number of state customer accounts within our portfolio, and there are other CCAs in California that have state accounts within their jurisdiction. And so we looked at what the cost impact might be if the rate disparity that we see today were to continue into the future, and that allowed us to quantify some additional costs to the state, which were just over $500,000 in a year for the 3 CCAs, Marin, Lancaster, and Sonoma Clean Power. So those data points got this bill onto suspense in the Appropriations Committee, but ultimately it was removed from suspense, and it was moved to the floor for a vote on the Assembly floor. And that vote was just about a week and a half ago, and it was voted out of the floor. The vote was 15 to 51, so there were some opposing votes and some very articulate speakers from the Assembly that spoke in opposition to the bill, and that was great to see that some of our representatives really understood the issue and did a great job of articulating the problems with the issue. Throughout the process leading up to and during the floor vote, there was a lot of misinformation being circulated about our program, and that was really discouraging to see. And we spent a lot of time refuting misinformation about our rates being higher, misinformation about our products not being greener, products being dirtier, and misinformation about the outreach process that we use when we enroll customers. There's a lot of concerns expressed about customers not knowing who they're getting their service from, and there was a push poll conducted in Richmond about 3 months ago that was sponsored by IBEW that they have not yet ever released the questions of the poll or the responses in the poll, but they reported out on some of the things that they found. It's worth noting that they used the wrong name. They were asking customers if they didn't use MCE, they used Marin Energy Authority, which we didn't do any of our marketing under that name. So that was one problem with the poll. The framing of the questions was another problem, but that led to some confusion and some misinformation. During the floor vote, we saw quite a few of the supporters of the bill regurgitating a lot of the misinformation that they've been told leading up to the vote. So, a couple of actions that I'm going to tell you about, a couple of activities that are related that kind of happened on the sidelines with all of this. Around the time that the bill went to the Utilities and Commerce Committee, IBEW really started doing a lot of attacks here in our community, and it's unfortunate because we haven't seen this type of negative publicity, negative marketing campaign since we were launching back in 2010. So it's feeling a little bit like 2010. In some ways, the attacks that we saw were really, again, filled with misinformation about our power being dirtier, our rates being higher, and really focusing on our procurement with misinformation about our procurement and our portfolio, and driving people to sign a petition to support the bill. And you all might have seen that. Anyone who reads the IJ, I'm sure, has seen the big banner ads that have been taken out. This time it's not PG&E that's doing it directly, it's the IBEW 1245, which serves PG&E, is the employee union for most of PG&E's workers. Also, in June, I think it's somewhat related, the IBEW mailed CEQA threats to many of the CCA communities that are exploring, many of the communities that are exploring CCA. These went to many of the communities in East Bay that Alex talked about. They also went to Cloverdale and some of the communities in Sonoma County that haven't yet joined the CCA program up there. They also went to San Diego and some other communities, I believe, down south of here, and to Napa, actually. So it's been interesting to see that happening again. You know, for those of you who are around, in 2009, we had the same tactic used on our agency when we were trying to launch. I know Greg remembers that very well.
Very well.
At that time, it was PG&E making the threat.
Yep.
This time, it's IBEW 1245. One other thing I'll mention that is kind of a side note: when the attacks started coming out in our community, the original attack that we saw via email, there were some links to PG&E in the email that the IBEW was sending out, and as a result, we submitted a letter to the CPUC asking them to do some fact-finding to determine if PG&E was violating the Code of Conduct. Code of Conduct came out of the Leno Bill, SB 790, that was adopted, also named the McGlashan Bill, which was adopted in late 2011 and was intended to level the playing field, or help level the playing field between CCAs and IOUs. And it requires that any IOU that's going to market against a CCA program first file an implementation or marketing plan showing how they're going to market and ensuring that there is a kind of a firewall between their existing business operations and their marketing activities. So they couldn't, for example, use customer phone numbers to do phone banking, which is something that we saw happen in 2010. PG&E has not filed a marketing plan. They have refused to do that, and they've instead filed a letter with the CPUC saying they choose not to market, and they will not be marketing against CCA programs. So there are concerns about whether they are violating the Code of Conduct, and the CPUC did respond by issuing a letter to PG&E asking a lot of questions about their ties to IBEW and if they're using the IBEW as a third-party intermediary to do marketing on their behalf. And that process is ongoing. There's a bit of back and forth dialogue going on there, which I'm happy to talk to any of you about afterwards if you have questions about it. Shifting back to the bill, a lot of things happened on the opposed side, and I'll say a little bit about what we did in our shop and a little bit about what I'm seeing in the broader community. We pulled together a really great-looking, comprehensive booklet about our program and about the bill and how the bill would impact our program. And this booklet is a spiral-bound booklet that has been handed out to all the members. It was handed out to all the members in the Assembly. Now it's been updated a bit, and it's now going to all the folks on the Senate side. And it's been a really great reference point as we talk through a lot of the misinformation that folks are hearing. So that was a great effort. We had a lot of meetings with decision makers on the Assembly side. There's a lot of folks on that side, so hard to get to all of them, but a lot of efforts there. I want to thank Director Bailey and Director Green for the efforts that you made to contact decision makers on the Assembly side and now on the Senate side. That was really very helpful, and you all were both so proactive on that. We really appreciate it. Many of your cities and towns have signed letters of opposition to the bill. That's so very helpful. I mean, those have been added to the list, and every time we go out and meet with folks on the Senate side now, we're mentioning those letters, so that was really an important action. And I don't mean to leave out the county. The cities and towns have done this. The County of Marin also has done this, and that's very, very helpful. Also, the County of Marin and the City of Richmond have have turned their lobbyists loose on this issue as well and directed them to spend some time on this, and that's really very helpful. We're really great. It's great to see that happening. And also a big thank you to Director Butt for the work that you're doing to help with union outreach and some of the other advice and involvement that you've had on this bill. We appreciate it. So lots of thanks. The staff has been doing a lot of heavy lifting as well, so big thanks to the staff. Some of the organizations that are opposing, there have been a lot of grassroots efforts around this as well that we really aren't controlling or directing at all. It's been really inspiring to see this, and I think, I don't know if Alex isn't here anymore, but you're still here. I love the way that Alex is so excited about this bill, because there is a lot of grassroots activity, and he's right, and that is exciting. So I guess that's the silver lining of all this. Out of the 150 organizations that are opposing, it's just a very broad-based coalition. There are a lot of local governments, a lot of cities and towns and counties, the League of Cities, and then we have some labor organizations, a few of them, that have signed on to oppose the bill. We have many of our suppliers have signed on to oppose the bill. So we have a list of folks that generate power that are opposed. The TURN is opposed, ABAG, Bay Area Air Quality Management District, Sierra Club, LA County. I could go on, but if you're interested in seeing the whole list, we're happy to share that with you. And there's been a lot of grassroots groups having lobby day, going out meeting with their local representatives. There's a petition, I understand, with over 20,000 signatures opposing the bill, and that's exciting to see as well. So just to kind of cut to the chase here to where we are, current actions underway. We're meeting with a lot of members on the Senate side now that the bill has switched to the Senate side. The next stop for the bill is going to likely be the Energy Committee, and that's tentatively scheduled for June 23rd. There is a meeting on the 16th of June, but we've been told that it will not land there. It's worth noting that with this bill, we've been told a lot of things that end up not happening, and whether that's intentional or not, I'm not sure, but I'm not going to hang my hat on that June 23rd date just yet, but we'll keep you all posted once we know that that's firm. So meetings with members on the Energy Committee are particularly important right now, and let me know if you all would like to know more about that and who we've been meeting with and how those discussions are going. If the bill gets out of the Energy Committee, it ultimately will need to go to the floor of the Senate for a vote, and then it ultimately will need to go to the governor's desk for signature by August 30th. We have a meeting with the governor's office as well. So that's kind of the overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I had a few points, Dawn.
Yeah, please.
The first is, for those of you who are wondering, I believe Mark Levine was a really great champion for MCE and CCAs generally, so before you guys get out your cell phones and start calling, I just want you to know that he did a really great job and did what he could and did a really great speech on the floor. The spiral bound notebooks that Dawn was referring to, you received a very early version last month. We've updated it pretty extensively, so if you'd like another copy, just let me know.
Would you send it out to everybody?
Yeah.
Sure.
It'll be a huge file, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a good 40 or 50 pages now.
With lots of
Put a
visuals.
link on your website or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do
Or
that.
Dropbox.
Okay, and there were also a few op-eds that I wanted to call attention to. One was written by Gail McLaughlin and who was it?
Jeff Byron.
Jeff Byron, who's a former CEC commissioner, Mayor McLaughlin of Richmond, and that was published in the Sacramento Bee. How many? I mean, it feels like a year ago to me, but it was probably only a couple weeks. And then we had an op-ed with Director Butt and Director Bailey in the Marin IJ refuting some of the lies in earlier op-ed in the Marin IJ. So there was also an op-ed in the San Diego Union Tribune by a CCA advocate down there. So there's definitely a lot of groundswell of support. And the one thing I like to talk about most is the protest in San Diego. There was a protest of Speaker Atkins' office by environmentalists in San Diego who were very displeased with her decision to vote in favor of this bill. They had great signs and great participation. They were covered by Univision, which was pretty amazing. they got some coverage in some local papers as well. And my favorite protest sign was a Mr. Burns character, like it was tall and it said, you know, no corporate profits over community or something like that. It was just an awesome sign, and I thought you guys would all get a kick out of that. So that was my very important update.
Director Green.
I'd like to add kind of a little different perspective. Having listened to the tape of the, I think it was April 28th meeting in front of the first Assembly subcommittee, which for weeks wasn't available. And when I listened to it, it became apparent why it probably wasn't available. And while Dawn's pretty polite in her characterizations of misinformation, the way that the PG&E lobbyist postured his presentation was really accusing MCE of fraud. I mean, it was pretty blatant and pretty clear. And the way that the legislation 2145 was also being postured was consumer protection. And so the presentation that was made, I can't remember the name of the guy, was really well organized and really clear and really detailed and completely wrong. But the presentation on its face was clean as a whistle. It looked really, really legitimate. So what, in my estimation, what we're fighting is a very nasty campaign, and it's not polite, it's not nice, and the characterizations.
Yeah, I kind of saw that myself.
You did. You saw that big time. Yeah, as the bringer in of filthy energy to Marin County, and lying about it. So that PR, or in my language, propaganda piece was reflected in the comments that were made to that initial Senate subcommittee. And I think we...
Assembly.
Assembly. And so...
Some hope in the Senate.
Well, I think there is, because now, where maybe before we didn't have a clear outline of what it was or what it is that we have to confront, and that we really have to directly take on and rebut, because it was like Dawn said, the criticism was that all the people in Richmond, they didn't know that they were part of Marin Clean Energy, and it was a big fraud on them, and 2145 was needed to fix that, and that MCE and it is almost an alter ego of Shell Oil, and that there's no differentiation there, and that all of the renewable benefits that MCE claims to promote is really a bunch of balderdash. It's all based on paper, and it's all Rex, and it all doesn't mean anything. And so when those kinds of characterizations are postured in language that doesn't come outright and say that it's blatantly phony, they don't have to. And so that's really what's getting thrown at us. And in my estimation, in order to be effective, we need to be very, very direct in our responses. So I wanted to add that bit, because it took me forever to get a copy of that tape of the meeting, and then as soon as I heard it, it was obvious why it had been suppressed for a while, because there was so much misinformation, and so the inaccuracies were so blatant that it would have been easy with some homework to rebut them. But if there's no time to do the homework, there's no rebutting. And that's the kind of game we're playing. This is a big leagues, nasty, dirty game, and we have to step up and play.
If you mind, I'd like to echo what Ford said in a couple of ways. First of all, Ford's right on, I think, in his analysis. there were two primary arguments being thrown in Marine Clean Energy from my own takeaway. One of them was that we are perpetrating half-truths on the universe, that we are not fully and fairly disclosing how green the power really is. And the second one is that we are somehow depriving our constituents of choice. And there's a sort of a free market principle which we allegedly are somehow infringing on. That's the big picture, how they're coming at Marine Clean Energy. Second thing is, I did make a bunch of calls to anybody I could, whether I knew them or didn't, had leverage or didn't, in an effort to try to see what could be done here. And it was terribly, terribly discouraging how the merits of Assembly Bill 2145 was an irrelevancy. First of all, there was very little education about what it meant or what the consequences were, and very little care. I did not have any sense at all that any of the many staffers I spoke to were particularly engaged, good, bad, or indifferent, and that they were following concerns which were only remotely related to what the substance of the bill meant. I don't have a proposal or an option for you on how to fix those things, but I would really like to call to action us as a group. If we know anybody, if we can do anything, we should do it, because the truth is not enough. It's not. We have to make calls, we have to write letters, we have to publish things in the paper. Faith and and the facts are not getting it done. At least it didn't in the Assembly. Dawn and her staff have an excellent plan and how they're trying to implement it, but we are outmatched in terms of what we are facing, which is a well-moneyed, well-educated, well-leveraged utilities, right? And they're doing their thing well. I don't know how we fight this thing. I don't know what you did in 2010 to beat it back then, which was essentially a similar thing, but that is where we are. We need to go to the mattresses.
And that's a good segue into next steps, but yeah.
Does Jerry Brown or Gavin Newsom make any difference in this, and where are they?
Yeah, I think that the governor does have the ultimate final decision if the bill makes it to his desk. I think that he has in the past been very supportive of CCAs. He's very supportive of the work that we're doing to help achieve AB 32 goals and set the bar higher for renewable procurement. And we've definitely seen that support in the past. I think at the same time.
Where is he now?
Well, I don't think anyone knows yet. I don't know that
so
he knows yet.
So he hasn't taken a formal, his office has not taken a position.
Yeah, it's not typical for their office to take a position at this point in the process. He does have strong allegiances to labor organizations. So I'm sure that's a factor. And I think, I'd like to spend a minute talking about labor, if we could, just to make sure everyone is on the same page with the facts, because there's been a lot of misinformation circulated about labor in particular. I used to be a labor organizer. I hold in very high regard the concept of union formation and union support and prevailing wage work and fair wages for work. And I think that we have done a lot within our organization to support that. And a lot of the contracts that we have in place are with the folks that are doing the work are part of the IBEW 1245. So we're very puzzled by why this attack is being aimed at us from the union, separate from the utilities that are behind it. I mean, that seems to be the only obvious answer for why we would have this attack being thrown at us. We've done nothing but make multiple constant attempts to meet with folks at the IBEW. We've accelerated our efforts to do that since these attacks have become have come at us in the last couple of months to see how we can build bridges and become partners going into the future. I think that we're going to be building new generation. We're going to have jobs, and we'd love to partner with folks that are experts in the field and can help us fill those needs. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue those dialogues. We've had meetings with labor union organizations in the past, far before this came up, because it was important to us as an agency to go down that track. So just so everyone's aware, that's another thing that is high on the list of misinformation that's being spread about MCE, that we don't support labor, because we absolutely do. And some of the information in the booklet might be a helpful reference point if you have questions about this. We did a bit of number crunching based on the number of jobs that's created per megawatt of power for different technologies. Geothermal, for example, has a different number than solar. And we looked at our portfolio, and we looked at the number of jobs that are tied to that portfolio, and it's about 1,300 jobs. So it's not as big as the workforce that PG&E employs. They're handling all the transmission and distribution as well, which is about 90% of the IBEW. But we are supporting IBEW jobs through the generation projects that we purchase. So I think it's useful to put that out there. And while I say that the governor has ties to labor, I think that if the facts are on the table, I don't think that's going to be a problem. We've actually engaged the governor's office to see if they could broker a meeting between MCE and the IBEW, because they have not been willing to meet with us. And we thought it might be helpful to the governor to get us on the same page so that he's not put in a tough position.
Director.
Well, Dawn's touched on some of this, but the information I'm getting, and I don't know, nobody's told me the exact details of it, but PG&E cut some kind of deal with their IBEW union, and there was something exchanged, and the union agreed to become the third-party entity putting this thing forward. And then something I didn't find out until a couple of days ago is that it wasn't just IBEW, they signed on the State Building and Construction Trades Councils of California, which are all the construction trades in the AFL-CIO. And they wrote a support letter to the Assembly Utility and Commerce Committee on April 23rd. And the problem is that these construction trade unions are just, they're like blood brothers, and one thing I'm working on is trying to peel some of them off. And I'm not sure it can be done, I think one thing that people have suggested to me, I just don't have time to do all this, but start working on some. The problem is that the legislature is really busy and the staff's really busy. And I think one of the things, they look at this as a labor bill, and you've got a Democratic controlled legislature, and, when labor wants something, they get it. It doesn't matter what it is, the facts are irrelevant. And that's what makes this so frustrating, is this is not a fact-driven battle, it's a political battle. And so one thing people have suggested to me is try to work with some of the non-construction unions like SEIU and the nurses and teachers and some of those who tend to be very progressive and tend to be very interested in environmental issues. And that might be more fertile ground than trying to peel off these construction trades. These are like gangs,
Have you talked to the labor? Yeah.
What?
Have you talked to the labor?
I talked to I started with the Contra Costa County Construction Trades person who heads that, and he turned me on to the local IBEW local, and he didn't even know any of that. And he said, well, I'll check on it. And a couple of days later, he sends me this letter from the State Building Construction Trades Council. He says, look, this decision was made at a much higher pay grade than mine. He said, I can't do anything to help. And that's what we're up against.
Why don't we go here, and then Dawn, let's talk about next step, Senate Energy Committee. outreach there. I think we do need to continue this strategy. I have some ideas on that. But go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am a retired carpenters union organizer, and we're not affiliated with State Construction and Building Trades Council. And I have a name and a phone number I can give you later. Because for the head of our Northern California Regional Council, that you may be able to talk with, for one thing. And since the legislation is, I guess, started with the Assembly and going to the Senate, eventually to the Governor, where I live, we have Senator Jerry Hill, who doesn't have a great relationship with PG&E.
No,
He's the chair of the Environmental Quality Committee. Is this legislation going to touch the environmental quality?
At this point,
He's a good friend of mine. I helped him get elected a couple of years ago. So I'm thinking that I should talk with him, and also Assemblyman Mullen. I was just in his office yesterday. So I'd like to get more information if I could. I'll give you my card and with my information. So thank you very much.
It just so happens he's on the Senate Energy.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so just to add that in, I'd like to talk with you, and you.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, so without kind of beating a dead horse here, we know that we're in a battle, that the next step is in the Senate, that we have to do community education and outreach, get allies. I don't think the labor community is going to be monolithic on this. We do have a track record to talk about. So why doesn't everyone stay ready to get involved as we need? I think we have some legislative hearings coming up. We have outreach to do. So Dawn, you want to just kind of conclude at this point?
Yeah, so we have 2 weeks before the Energy Committee is scheduled to take up this matter, and I think these 2 weeks are really important. The nice thing about this committee is there are only 11 members on it, so it's a lot different than dealing with a 100-member assembly floor. And we can send you that list. We'll send that out tomorrow. We have just a one-pager with contact information for each of the offices. It also tells what districts they represent, in case that's helpful. And we'll include with that a list of talking points that might be helpful if you want to reach out to any of these members, if you have any connections with them. I think multiple points of contact are helpful because that's what they're getting from the other side. So you might go in and meet with an office one day, and then the next day someone will come in from the other side and give a lot of misinformation, and they don't typically call us back after that. But if they get another call from someone on our board or someone who's an advocate, they might say, well, I heard this thing that didn't sound quite right, can you explain it? And so I think multiple calls over the next couple of weeks would be really very helpful for each of the members on this committee. And I think that's where our focus needs to be as far as the actual decision makers themselves. And then I also think reaching out to labor on any front we can think of. If any of you have ideas, please let me know. I'm happy to brainstorm. And we do have a few different tracks going on the labor front to reach out. I think getting letters of opposition from any labor organization would be really very, very valuable at any time, but sooner rather than later. So please send us your ideas on that. Let us know if you have contacts or groups you can connect us with.
What about higher, I understand there have been some op-eds that have gone out, and those are helpful, but they tend to be, they're op-eds, so they tend to be obviously viewpoints. What about kind of higher level press coverage?
Yeah.
I'm even thinking kind of national media.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that we could consider. We spent a little time looking at contacts that we have along those lines. I think that the question is where to focus our efforts, but I think it certainly couldn't hurt, particularly if anyone has inroads to national press. That would be very helpful rather than a cold call. We're such a localized agency, we don't typically build those types of relationships. But
there's kind of a visceral appeal to the story in many respects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one piece that's really interesting and would be interesting, at a national level, or maybe even in the Sacramento Bee, is the amount of dollars that changed hands at the tail end of the decision making on the assembly side. Fortunately, there are rules that require them to post cash donations within 24 hours. And so it was interesting to me to see the donations that came in for the chair of the Appropriations Committee, who seemed to really understand our point of view a week before it was released. But during the course of that week, about 20 grand came in from labor. And we don't do that. So.
Would it be possible to, given all the materials that you've accumulated in support of your efforts so far, would it be possible to distill some of that into a piece that could be shared with press, with frankly an aggressive tone?
You mean the story of what's happened thus far?
Yeah. I mean, and put it in terms of the story. Not so much the technicalities, the factual issue, but the way in which the opposition has been mounted.
Yes. And what I found in working with reporters, they often are very happy to do their own homework if they kind of get the gist of the main points.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting. But the visceral appeal here is not the technicalities of opt-ins and opt-outs and things like that.
Absolutely.
But the visceral appeal here is small, community-focused organization doing battle with a big California investor-owned utility.
Yeah.
It's just, that's the story.
Yeah.
So conveying that to, significant, maybe national media, and say, here's a story that you ought to write.
It's Prop 16 revisited.
It is. Since that failed, this is the next step.
Well, also,
that's a great idea.
National media covered the pipelines blowing up, right? So
Yeah.
PG&E doesn't exactly have a great reputation in the New York Times.
Here they go again.
Yeah, and it's another one of those, but I think we do have to address when it goes to the media, this stuff that's been in the IJ about dirty power and, using coal and having dirtier energy than PG&E. I mean, that's the prevailing thought right now, right?
Yeah.
That's what's out there.
These are great suggestions. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
To answer Sloan, you asked what did we do in 2010. It was a grassroots statewide effort. It was reaching out to every network on the phone, just blitzing San Diego, Los Angeles, the Inland Empire. It wasn't just the Bay Area. It wasn't just Marin County. And I think what we're hearing is everyone's got a contact here and there, and we've got lots of good ideas. It needs to be statewide. And so if you have connections, if you have friends, if you have people in politics, if you have people in unions, if you have the environmental groups, all of the groups that are listed opposing this generally have affiliates in other parts of the state, and we need to get our people that we're connected to activate those networks in other places, because the senators from the rest of the state, Mark Leno gets it, Noreen Evans gets it, right? We need to be activating senators from the rest of the state. They need to be hearing from their constituents. That's the big key piece here, I think, in terms of mobilizing. This room cannot get it all done, but we all know people who can help get it done.
Great point. Anything further? Okay. Good discussion. Good discussion. Any further legislative update?
I think that's enough.
Yeah.
There is one other bill. This is a quick one, but there is a bill that's come out of the Senate. This is a Padilla bill, 456, and it would modify the power content label. And exactly how it would be modified is not yet known. But we're tracking that bill, and we'll keep you all posted on it.
Okay, thanks, Don. Anything further, board member, staff matters for the good of the order?
Oh, one thing, thank you for the acronym list.
In our stuff, started in acronym key. So for those of us who.
On that note,
I've lost it.
Thank you.